The oath of Silver Creek, the knife trembled against Cole Ryder's throat, held by hands too small for such fury. 11-year-old Mara Hollis stood between him and the cabin door, sweat dripping down her sunburned face. Not from fear, but from the suffocating heat that had turned their shelter into an oven. Behind her, 4 desperate children watched. Ben with his twisted leg, Lily, who hadn't spoken in months, Noah, whom the town pretended didn't exist, and little Faye burning with fever on a pile of rags. Cole had stumbled here seeking oblivion. Instead, he found 5 lives the whole damn town had abandoned. Before we begin this story of redemption in the unforgiving American West, I invite you to join me on this journey. Please hit that like button and comment with your city below. I want to see how far this tale of courage and broken promises travels across the world. The summer sun beat down on Silver Creek territory with the kind of merciless intensity that made men question their sanity for settling this godforsaken stretch of Wyoming. Heat shimmered off the packed dirt main street, turning the air thick and wavering. Cole Ryder walked that street with the purposeful stride of a man seeking something specific, though what exactly, even he couldn't say. Whiskey, maybe. Or just a place to collapse where no one would ask questions. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust with each step. The war had ended 3 years back, but Cole still carried it in the haunted spaces behind his eyes, in the slight favor he gave his left leg where Confederate grapeshot had torn through muscle, in the way his hand instinctively moved toward a hip where a service revolver once hung. He drifted through a dozen towns since Appomattox, never staying longer than his welcome or his money lasted, whichever gave out first. Silver Creek looked like all the others. False-fronted buildings lined both sides of the rutted street, their paint peeling in the relentless heat. A general store, a saloon, a land office, a church with a steeple that leaned slightly westward as if trying to escape. Women in calico dresses hurried between patches of shade, hands pressed to bonnets against the wind that offered no relief, only more dust. Men gathered in small clusters outside the saloon, their conversations dying as Cole passed. He felt their eyes measure him. The threadbare Confederate gray jacket he still wore despite the heat, the stubble on his jaw, the hollow look of a man who'd stopped caring about tomorrow. Just another drifter. Just another broken soldier adding to the West's collection of the damaged and dispossessed. The saloon's interior offered shade, but little coolness. Cole's eyes adjusted to the dim light as he approached the bar. A warped plank of wood balanced on whiskey barrels. The bartender, a thick-necked man with suspicious eyes, watched him approach. "Whiskey," Cole said, his voice rough from disuse. "You got money?" Cole laid 2 coins on the bar, nearly the last of what he had. The bartender poured a measure that barely covered the bottom of a smudged glass. Cole drank it without tasting, felt the familiar burn, and gestured for another. "Passing through?" the bartender asked, more statement than question. "That's right." "Looking for work. Try Crane Ranch. Widow Crane pays fair for honest labor." Cole nodded without commitment. Work meant staying, and staying meant connections, and connections meant caring when you left. Easier to keep drifting. He was reaching for his third pour when raised voices erupted from the street. The bartender moved to the window, peering through the dust-filmed glass. "Damn Hollis kid's causing trouble again," he muttered. Something in his tone, disgust mixed with something darker, something like satisfaction, made Cole turn. Through the window he saw a cluster of well-dressed townspeople gathered around 2 children. A boy, maybe 10, with one leg twisted at an unnatural angle, leaned heavily on a makeshift crutch. Beside him stood a girl, perhaps 8, her face expressionless and still. "Someone should do something about them," a woman at a nearby table said, loud enough to ensure she was heard. "It's indecent, letting them wander around like wild animals." "Reverend Crow's handling it," her companion replied. "He'll have them placed properly soon enough." The bartender snorted. "If by properly you mean shipped east to work in some mill until they drop. Crow's got a whole operation going. Turns a nice profit on orphans, I hear." Cole felt something stir beneath the whiskey's numbing warmth, something he'd thought long dead. He pushed away from the bar. "Where are you going?" the bartender called after him. Cole didn't answer. He was already moving toward the door, drawn by an instinct he didn't understand and couldn't name. Perhaps it was the boy's eyes, visible even through the dirty window, watchful and ancient. The eyes of someone who'd learned too young that the world was a cruel place. Perhaps it was the girl's stillness, The kind of frozen silence that came after screaming yourself hoarse with no one listening. Or perhaps it was simply that Cole recognized them, recognized himself in their abandonment, their isolation, their desperate attempt to survive in a world that had marked them as disposable. The afternoon heat hit him like a physical blow as he stepped back into the street. The group of townspeople had dispersed, leaving the two children standing alone. The boy noticed Cole first, his hand moving protectively to the silent girl's shoulder. "We ain't begging," the boy said, his voice sharp with defensive pride. "We don't need nothing from nobody." "Didn't figure you were." Cole stopped a respectful distance away, hands visible and empty. "You're the Hollis kids?" The boy's eyes narrowed. "What's it to you?" "Nothing. Just heard your name mentioned." Cole studied them more carefully now. Both were thin, not just lean, but genuinely malnourished, their faces gaunt and their clothes hanging loose on bony frames. The girl's dress, once yellow, was now a patchwork of stains and poorly mended tears. The boy's shirt was too large, sleeves rolled up multiple times, and his single boot was split along the sole. But it was the heat exhaustion Cole recognized, the flush on their faces, the slightly glazed look in their eyes, the way they swayed almost imperceptibly. How long had they been standing in this sun? "There's shade in the alley," he offered, "if you need it." "We're fine." But even as the boy said it, the girl's knees buckled slightly. He caught her with practiced ease, his thin arms supporting her weight despite his own obvious weakness. Cole's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before. Soldiers at the end of long marches, pride keeping them upright long after their bodies had nothing left to give. "Suit yourself." He turned back toward the saloon, then paused. "If you change your mind, there's water at the trough behind the general store. Public access. No charity, just water." He didn't wait for a response, but as he reached the saloon door, he heard the scrape of boot leather and crutch on packed earth, the sound of two children moving toward the offered water with as much dignity as desperation would allow. Inside, the bartender was waiting. "You got a soft spot for strays?" "Just thirsty children in summer heat," Cole replied evenly. "Seems like basic human decency." Decency. The bartender laughed without humor. "Those kids have been making do since their parents died last winter. Whole town knows about it. Reverend Crow checks on them regular, makes sure they're fed enough to keep breathing." "Just enough?" The bartender shrugged. "Ain't our responsibility to raise other people's children. The Reverend will place them somewhere appropriate when the time's right." Cole reached for his glass but found his hand was shaking, not from whiskey need, but from a rage so sudden and fierce it stole his breath. "How many are there?" "What?" "Children. How many Hollis kids?" "5, I think. Maybe 6. Hard to keep track." The bartender refilled Cole's glass uninvited. "You thinking of playing hero? Save yourself the trouble. Those kids don't want saving. The oldest one, Mara, she's mean as a snake. Ran off 3 different families who tried to take them in. Threatened one woman with a kitchen knife. Maybe she had good reason. Or maybe she's just wild. Some people can't be civilized, soldier. The war should have taught you that." Cole drained his glass and stood, dropping his last coin on the bar. The whiskey sat heavy in his stomach, mixing with something harder to digest. The memory of other children in other wars, other towns that had looked away while the weak suffered, other men who'd found reasons not to care. "Where do they live?" he asked. The bartender's expression shifted to something between amusement and pity. "Old Hollis place, about a mile out past the north end of town. But I'm telling you, you're wasting your time. Mara'll probably stick that knife in you before you get 2 words out." "I'll take my chances." The walk to the Hollis place gave Cole time to question every decision that had led him here. He'd come to Silver Creek looking for oblivion, not responsibility. The last thing a broken soldier needed was to tangle himself in someone else's troubles. He had nothing to offer these children, no money, no home, no future to speak of. But he kept walking. The cabin appeared first as a shimmer in the heat, then gradually took shape, a single-room structure that had seen better days even before it became a tomb for hope. The roof sagged dangerously on one side, missing shingles exposing bare wood underneath. One window was covered with oiled paper instead of glass. The door hung crooked on leather hinges, gaps visible around the frame wide enough to let in weather, dust, and despair. Cole's military training cataloged the defensive advantages automatically. Good sight lines, difficult approach, natural cover from the scrub brush. Then he caught himself. These were children, not soldiers, though perhaps the distinction had blurred for them months ago. He was still 50 yards out when he heard it, a sound between a cough and a wheeze, wet and labored. Someone inside was sick. Very sick. Cole quickened his pace, then froze as a figure materialized in the doorway. The girl, Mara, the bartender had called her, stood silhouetted against the cabin's dark interior. She was older than the two children he'd seen in town, maybe 11 or 12, with long, dark hair pulled back in a severe braid. Her dress was cleaner than the others' clothes had been, carefully mended, but her face carried the weight of someone 3 times her age. And in her hand, pressed against her thigh but clearly visible, was a kitchen knife. That's far enough. Her voice was steady despite her obvious youth, carrying across the distance with surprising authority. We don't want whatever you're selling. Cole stopped, hands at his sides, palms forward. Not selling anything, just wanted to talk. About what? About whether you need help. Mara's laugh was brittle, sharp-edged. We don't. Go away. The coughing sound came again, weaker now, followed by a child's whimper. Mara's composure cracked for just a second, a flash of desperate fear crossing her young face before the hardness returned. One of them is sick, Cole said. It wasn't a question. We're handling it. Are you? He took a careful step forward. Because that sounds like pneumonia. Summer pneumonia is worse than winter. Air's so thick and hot, lungs can't clear. Child that's sick needs a doctor. We can't pay a doctor. The words came out sharp and defensive. We can't pay for nothing, so whatever you came here for, I came to see if you needed help, that's all. Why? The knife came up slightly, catching sunlight. Nobody helps for free. What do you want? It was a fair question, one Cole couldn't answer honestly, because he didn't know himself. What did he want? He'd stopped wanting anything years ago, stopped believing in anything beyond the next bottle, the next town, the next empty horizon. Nothing, he said finally. I want nothing from you. Liar. Everyone wants something. Another wheezing cough, longer this time, ending in a sound no child should make. Mara's hand tightened on the knife handle, knuckles white with the effort of maintaining control. Cole made a decision. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, watching Mara's eyes. She tensed but held her ground, letting him approach until he was close enough to see the exhaustion etched into her features, the dark circles beneath her eyes, the slight tremor in her knife hand. My name's Cole Ryder, he said quietly. I was a soldier. I've seen pneumonia kill strong men in their prime. That child in there doesn't have much time without medicine. We tried. Mara's voice cracked. We tried everything. Herbs, steam, prayers. Nothing works. She just keeps getting worse, and I can't. The knife lowered slightly as tears pooled in her eyes. I don't know what else to do. Let me help. How? You got money for a doctor? Medicine? You got some magic cure? No. Cole met her gaze steadily. But I can try. That's more than nobody doing nothing. Mara studied him for a long moment, this strange man in a Confederate jacket who'd walked into their disaster for no reason she could understand. Finally, she stepped aside. If you hurt any of them, I'll kill you. I don't care how big you are or what you did in the war. I'll wait until you're sleeping, and I'll cut your throat. Fair enough. The cabin's interior was worse than Cole had imagined. The summer heat had turned it into an oven, the air thick and stifling, heavy with the smell of sickness and unwashed bodies. His eyes adjusted slowly to the dim light filtering through the paper-covered window and gaps in the walls. 4 children stared at him from various positions around the single room. The boy with the crutch, Ben, Cole would learn, sat protectively beside a pile of rags that barely qualified as a bed. On those rags lay the smallest child, a girl who couldn't be more than 5, her face flushed with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. The silent girl from town, Lily, stood in the corner, her expression blank but her eyes tracking Cole's every movement. And in the other corner, partially hidden in shadow, sat a black boy of perhaps 9, his face wary and closed. This is Noah, Mara said, following Cole's gaze. Before you ask, yeah, he's with us. We don't care what the town says about it. Cole nodded, understanding flooding through him. Of course. A black child living with white children in post-war Wyoming would be scandal enough. That these children had chosen to keep him, to protect him despite the town's judgment, told Cole more about their character than any words could. He moved slowly toward the sick child, crouching beside the makeshift bed. Up close, the fever was even more apparent, her skin radiating heat, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her small body racked with each labored breath. "What's her name?" "Faye." Mara knelt on the other side, her hand automatically going to her sister's forehead. "She's been like this for 3 days, getting worse every hour." Cole had seen enough battlefield medicine to know Mara was right. Without intervention, Faye had maybe a day, 2 at most. "The doctor in town won't come. We sent Ben yesterday. Doctor said he don't make house calls for charity cases, especially not for—" She glanced at Noah, her jaw tightening. "For families like ours." The rage Cole had felt in the saloon returned, colder now and more focused. "There has to be someone. The Reverend you mentioned. Reverend Crow." The name came out like a curse. "He brings food sometimes. Just enough to keep us breathing. Says he's working on proper placement for us, whatever that means. He knows Faye's sick. Hasn't done nothing about it." Ben spoke up, his voice rough but steady. "He wants her to die. All of them do. Then it's 4 problems instead of 5, and 4 is easier to split up and forget about." "Ben!" Mara's voice carried automatic reproof, but she didn't contradict him. Cole looked at each child in turn, these fierce, damaged survivors who'd been abandoned by every adult in their lives. Something in his chest, something he'd thought long dead, cracked open. "Listen to me," he said. "All of you, I'm going to make you a promise, and I keep my promises. 3 things." He held up 3 fingers. 1, I'm going to get medicine for Faye, and she's going to live. 2, I'm going to make sure you all have food and shelter, real shelter, not this. He gestured at the collapsing cabin. 3, nobody's taking you anywhere you don't want to go. Nobody's splitting you up. You understand? Silence. The children exchanged glances, a wordless communication born of months depending only on each other. Finally, Noah spoke. His voice was quiet but clear, carrying the careful pronunciation of someone who'd taught himself to speak proper in hopes it might make white people see him differently. "Why should we believe you?" "Because I got nothing to gain by lying. I'm nobody. I got no money, no home, no prospects. Helping you doesn't benefit me in any way." Cole stood, looking down at Faye's flushed face. "But I'm still going to do it, starting right now." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Mara, you got that knife handy?" Her hand moved to it automatically. "Yeah, why?" "Good. Keep it close. Don't let anyone in while I'm gone, except people you know for certain. And if Reverend Crow shows up," Cole's voice hardened, "you tell him you got a new guardian now. Tell him Cole Ryder said he can go to hell." For the first time since he'd arrived, something like hope flickered across Mara's face. "You're really coming back?" "I gave my word." The walk back to Silver Creek felt longer than the walk out had been. The sun had shifted lower in the sky, but the heat hadn't diminished. If anything, the packed earth radiated back the day's accumulated warmth, turning the air into something you had to push through with each breath. Cole's mind worked through logistics with the same systematic approach he'd once used for military campaigns. First priority, medicine for Faye. If the doctor wouldn't come to them, Cole would bring the doctor, by force if necessary. Second, food and clean water. Third, a plan to deal with Reverend Crow and whatever scheme the man was running. But underneath the planning, underneath the practical considerations, something else stirred, a sense of purpose Cole hadn't felt since before the war. These children needed him. More than that, they needed someone who would keep their word in a world that had taught them every promise was a lie. He wouldn't fail them. He couldn't. Because if he did, he might as well have died at Appomattox with all the other men who'd lost their reasons to keep living. The doctor's office sat above the general store, accessible by an external staircase that creaked alarmingly under Cole's weight. He didn't knock, just pushed open the door and walked into a small waiting room that smelled of carbolic acid and old tobacco. A woman looked up from a desk, her expression shifting from polite inquiry to suspicion in the space of a heartbeat. "We're closed. I need the doctor." "Dr. Hartwell isn't seeing patients today. You'll have to come back tomorrow." "No." Cole's voice was flat, brooking no argument. "There's a child dying a mile outside town. She needs medicine now, not tomorrow." The woman's face closed down. "If you're talking about the Hollis children, Dr. Hartwell has already made his position clear. He doesn't provide charity care, and he especially doesn't make house calls to, then he can tell me that himself. Cole moved past her desk toward the interior door. She squawked in protest, but he was already through it, entering a cluttered examination room where a middle-aged man in shirt sleeves looked up from a medical journal with an expression of profound irritation. "Sir, you cannot just barge in here." 5-year-old girl with pneumonia, Cole said. Fever, labored breathing, wet cough. She's got maybe a day without treatment. You're a doctor, so do your damn job. Dr. Hartwell's irritation shifted to cold disdain. "I assume you're referring to the Hollis orphans. As I explained to the boy who came yesterday, I don't provide free medical services. I have overhead, expenses, a practice to maintain. I'll pay." The doctor's eyebrows rose. "You have money?" Cole didn't. He had maybe $3 to his name, nowhere near enough for a doctor's services. But he'd figure that out later. "I'll get it. How much?" "For a house call, examination, and treatment?" Hartwell named a sum that made Cole's stomach sink, more than a month's wages for common labor. "Payable in advance, naturally." "Naturally." Cole's hand moved to his hip, fingers brushing the space where his revolver used to hang. Old habits. "And if I can't pay in advance, then I'm afraid the child will have to rely on prayer and providence. I'm a physician, not a charity organization." Hartwell returned to his journal, dismissing Cole. "Good day, sir." Cole stood frozen, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. He could drag this man to the Hollis cabin by force, make him treat Faye at gunpoint. But then what? Hartwell could easily give the wrong medicine, could let her die out of spite, could have Cole arrested for assault and kidnapping. The system was designed to protect men like Hartwell, to ensure that power and money determined who lived and who died. Cole had known that truth since long before the war, but somehow he'd forgotten how deeply it cut until he stood here, powerless to save a child's life because he couldn't produce enough coin. He was turning toward the door when a woman's voice stopped him. "Dr. Hartwell, you should be ashamed." Cole turned. A woman stood in the doorway he'd burst through, late 30s perhaps, with graying brown hair and a face that carried both strength and sorrow. She wore a simple calico dress dusted with flour, and her hands were rough from work. "Mrs. Thorne?" Hartwell's tone shifted to something almost conciliatory. "This doesn't concern you. A child dying concerns everyone. Or it should." She looked at Cole. "You're the man who gave the Hollis children water this afternoon." "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Hannah Thorne. I run the bakery." She turned back to Hartwell. "I'll pay for the girl's treatment." "Mrs. Thorne, I really don't think—" "I'll pay," Hannah repeated, her voice hardening. "And you'll provide your services immediately, or I'll make sure everyone in Silver Creek knows how you let a child die while demanding payment in advance. See how that affects your practice." The doctor's face flushed. "That's blackmail. That's community conscience, which you seem to have misplaced." Hannah opened her reticule, counting out bills. "Here's your advance payment. Now get your bag and do what you're supposed to do. Save lives instead of counting money." For a moment, Cole thought Hartwell might refuse anyway, pride overcoming greed. But the doctor finally stood, gathering supplies into a leather medical bag with sharp, angry movements. "This is highly irregular," he muttered. "So is letting children die," Hannah replied evenly. 20 minutes later, Cole and Hannah walked on either side of Dr. Hartwell's horse as it picked its way along the rutted path toward the Hollis cabin. The doctor rode in sullen silence, while Hannah peppered Cole with quiet questions. "How long have you been in Silver Creek?" "Few hours." "And you're already trying to save the Hollis children?" Something like approval warmed her voice. "Most men would have kept walking. Seemed like the right thing to do." "The right thing." Hannah laughed softly, without humor. "This town stopped caring about the right thing when it came to those kids months ago. We all knew they were suffering, we all saw it happening, and we all found reasons to look away. But you came today, because I'm tired of looking away. Because I'm tired of being ashamed when I see my own face in the mirror." She glanced at Cole. "You said you're nobody, back in the doctor's office. But nobodies don't usually fight for other people's children." "Didn't say I was a good nobody." They fell into companionable silence after that, broken only by the sound of hooves on hard earth and the doctor's occasional sigh of martyrdom. Cole found himself grateful for Hannah's presence, not just for the money she'd provided, but for the reminder that Silver Creek contained at least one person who'd choose conscience over convenience. Mara was waiting in the doorway when they approached, knife visible in her hand. Her eyes widened when she saw the doctor, then narrowed with suspicion. "He won't treat Faye without money," she said. "We ain't got money." "It's paid for," Cole told her. Mrs. Thorne covered it. Mara's gaze shifted to Hannah, assessing this new player in their desperate game. Hannah met her eyes steadily, offering a small smile that held no pity, only respect. "May we come in?" Hannah asked. After a pause, Mara stepped aside. Dr. Hartwell's examination was brisk and professional, his earlier resentment set aside in favor of medical focus. He listened to Faye's lungs, checked her fever, examined her throat and chest. The other children watched from their positions around the room, silent and wary as rabbits near a fox den. "Pneumonia," Hartwell confirmed. "Advanced stage. Should have been treated days ago." He pulled glass vials from his bag, mixing a powder with water. "This is quinine and willow bark extract. Tablespoon every 4 hours, including through the night. Keep her cool. Wet cloths on the forehead and chest. Force liquids when she's conscious enough to swallow." "Will she live?" Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. The doctor packed his bag, not meeting her eyes. "If the fever breaks in the next day or so, she has a chance. If it doesn't," he trailed off, the implication clear. "Thank you for coming," Hannah said firmly, walking the doctor back to his horse. Cole knelt beside Faye, carefully measuring the first dose of medicine. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, fever bright and unfocused, before closing again. He managed to get most of the liquid down her throat, holding her head gently, whispering encouragement she probably couldn't hear. "Now what?" Ben asked from his position against the wall. "Now we wait," Cole said, "and we keep her cool, keep giving medicine, keep praying she's strong enough to fight." "And after?" This from Noah, his voice carefully neutral. "What happens after?" Cole looked around the cabin, the sagging roof, the gaps in the walls, the complete absence of anything resembling adequate shelter. "After, we figure out somewhere better for you all to live. This place isn't fit for animals, let alone children. We can't afford better." "I know." Cole stood, his back cracking from the movement. "I'll figure something out." "How?" Mara's question carried genuine curiosity rather than challenge. "You said yourself you got nothing." "That's true. But I can work. I can earn." He met her eyes. "And I keep my promises." Hannah had returned from seeing the doctor off. She surveyed the cabin with a critical eye that missed nothing: the empty water barrel, the nearly bare shelves, the 5 sets of ribs visible through thin clothes. "When did you last eat?" she asked. The children exchanged glances. Finally, Ben answered. "Yesterday, Reverend Crow brought bread and a bit of salted pork." "Yesterday." Hannah's jaw tightened. "Right, I'm bringing food. Soup, bread, preserved fruit. I'll be back within the hour." She fixed Cole with a look. "You'll be here?" "I'll be here." After Hannah left, Cole set about making the cabin more bearable. He found rags and soaked them in the last of the water barrel, draping them over Faye's feverish skin. He opened the door and window fully, trying to create cross-ventilation in the stifling heat. He checked the roof gaps, mentally cataloging repairs needed. The children watched him work with varying degrees of skepticism and hope. Finally, Lily approached, the silent girl from town. She tugged on Cole's sleeve and pointed to the empty water barrel. "You're right," Cole said. "We need fresh water. Is there a well nearby?" "Creek," Mara said. "Quarter-mile south, but we can't carry enough in one trip for washing and drinking both." "I can." Cole found the bucket, dented and rusty but functional. "I'll make several trips." "Lily, you want to show me where?" The girl nodded, still silent, and led him out into the evening heat. The creek was a sorry excuse for running water, more mud than liquid, barely 3 feet wide, moving with painful slowness through the summer drought. But it was wet and relatively clean, and Cole filled bucket after bucket, making the quarter-mile trip 5 times while Lily waited by the cabin. On the 3rd trip, he asked her, "You got something you want to say? I won't mind if you talk." Lily's only response was to study him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Fair enough," Cole said. "You talk when you're ready." By the time Hannah returned with a basket heavy enough to require 2 hands, Cole had enough water stored to last through the night. The smell of fresh bread and vegetable soup brought all the children except Faye into instant alertness. a physical reaction to food that spoke volumes about how long they'd been hungry. Hannah distributed bowls with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, making sure each child got an equal portion, adding extra for Noah when she thought no one was looking. "Eat slowly," she cautioned. "Your stomachs aren't used to full meals." They didn't listen, of course. They ate like starving animals because that's what they were. Cole watched them and felt his throat tighten. "How long has it been like this?" he asked Hannah quietly. Their parents died in February. Influenza took them both within a week of each other. The town held a meeting about what to do with the children. Reverend Crow volunteered to manage the situation until permanent placements could be arranged. Hannah's voice was bitter. That was 5 months ago. He brings food maybe twice a week, just enough to keep them alive. Meanwhile, he's been negotiating with orphan placement agencies back east. Placement agencies. Factories, mostly. Mills that need small hands for dangerous work. Crow gets a finder's fee for each child he ships east. It's legal, technically. Even considered charitable in some circles. Hannah set down her bowl, her hands trembling slightly. "We've all known. The whole town has known. And we've done nothing because it was easier not to see." Cole's hands clenched into fists. "Where's this reverend now?" "He has a house on the west side of town. But Cole—" Hannah grabbed his arm as he started to rise. "Don't, not yet. You go after Crow without a plan, without standing, without anything but anger, and you'll end up in jail while these children end up in his custody anyway. You want to help them? Then be smart about it." She was right, Cole knew. The war had taught him that rage without strategy was just another form of suicide. But the knowledge didn't make the anger easier to swallow. They stayed through the evening, Cole and Hannah, taking turns bathing Faye with cool water and forcing medicine past her cracked lips. The other children gradually relaxed, exhaustion overcoming suspicion as their bellies filled for the first time in days. Ben fell asleep sitting up, his back against the wall, his twisted legs stretched out in front of him. Noah dozed in his corner, one eye still half open, old instincts never fully trusting safety. Lily curled up near Faye, her small hand reaching out to hold her sisters in sleep. Only Mara remained awake, watching Cole with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally, her voice barely audible over Faye's labored breathing. "Because nobody else would." "That ain't a reason. There's lots of things nobody else does. Don't make them your responsibility." Cole considered his answer carefully. This child had earned honesty through her suffering. "I had a daughter once, about Faye's age. She got sick during the war and I wasn't there. My wife tried to get help, but we had no money, and nobody would help without money, and—" His voice caught. "By the time I got home, it was too late." Mara was quiet for a long moment. "What was her name?" "Sarah. Sarah Ann Ryder." "I'm sorry." "Me too." Cole adjusted the cloth on Faye's forehead. "I can't save Sarah, but maybe I can save someone else's little girl. Maybe that's reason enough." "And when Faye's better, you'll just leave like everyone else?" "No." The word came out with absolute certainty. "I gave you my word, Mara. All 3 promises. Medicine for Faye, food and shelter for all of you, and nobody taking you anywhere against your will. I haven't finished keeping those promises yet." Mara studied him in the lamplight, this broken soldier who'd stumbled into their lives for reasons that defied logic. "You're either the best liar I ever met, or the first honest person in months. Guess you'll have to wait and see which." A sound like a laugh escaped her, rusty from disuse. "Guess so." Toward midnight, Faye's fever spiked higher. Her breathing turned ragged, her small body racked with coughs that brought up bloody phlegm. Cole held her while she convulsed, whispering the same useless words he'd whispered to Sarah years ago. "It's all right. You're safe. Just hold on." Knowing they were lies, but unable to offer anything else. Mara pressed her face against the wall, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs she wouldn't let anyone see. Hannah prayed quietly, her lips moving through words Cole had stopped believing in long ago. And in the darkest hour, when Faye's breathing slowed to barely perceptible gasps, Cole felt the familiar weight of failure settling over him like a burial shroud. He'd made promises he couldn't keep. He'd offered hope he had no right to give. He was about to watch another child die, and all his rage and good intentions wouldn't change it. But then, just as dawn began to gray the eastern sky, Faye's breathing deepened. Not much, barely noticeable, but enough. Her fever dropped a fraction of a degree. Her convulsions eased. "She's fighting," Hannah whispered. "Dear God, she's actually fighting." Cole pressed his fingers to Faye's throat, feeling her pulse, rapid but steadier now, more regular. "Come on," he murmured. "Come on, little fighter. You're stronger than this. I know you are." By sunrise, the crisis had passed. Faye slept deeply instead of unconsciously, her breathing still labored but no longer desperate. The fever remained high but had stopped its deadly climb. She wasn't out of danger, wouldn't be for days yet, but she had a chance. Cole sat back, every muscle trembling with exhaustion and relief. Around him, the other children were waking, their eyes immediately going to their youngest sister. "She's alive," Mara breathed. "You kept your first promise." "One down," Cole said. "Two to go." Outside, Silver Creek was beginning to wake up. A town that had condemned these children to death through indifference. A town that would soon learn it had a fight on its hands. Because Cole Ryder had made promises, and he'd already started keeping them. And nothing, not poverty, not pride, not Reverend Crow with his profitable schemes, nothing was going to stop him from finishing what he'd started. The morning sun brought heat that promised another punishing day. But inside the Hollis cabin, something had shifted. Faye's fever had broken just enough to pull her back from the edge, and that fragile victory changed everything. The children moved differently now, still cautious, still wary, but with a thread of hope woven through their wariness that hadn't existed 12 hours before. Cole hadn't slept. He'd kept vigil through the night, monitoring Faye's breathing, administering medicine on schedule, replacing cooling cloths as they warmed against her feverish skin. His eyes burned with exhaustion. His muscles ached from sitting in awkward positions on the hard floor, but he felt more alive than he had in years. Purpose, he discovered, was a powerful antidote to the slow poison of despair. Hannah had left just after dawn, promising to return with more food and clean cloth for bandages. Before she went, she'd placed a hand on Cole's shoulder, her grip firm and warm. "What you did last night, staying with her, fighting for her, that matters. Don't let anyone in this town tell you different." Now, alone with the 5 children in the strengthening light, Cole faced the reality of his second promise. Food and shelter. Real shelter. Not this death trap of rotting wood and failing hope. He had no money, no prospects, and no clear path forward. But he'd given his word, and the war had stripped him of everything except the ability to keep his promises. "Mara," he said quietly. The girl was awake. Had probably been awake all night just like him, watching over her siblings with the fierce protectiveness of someone who'd learned that vigilance was the price of survival. "I need to go into town. Find work. But Faye needs medicine every 4 hours, and someone needs to watch over all of you." "We've been watching over ourselves just fine." The defensive edge was back in her voice, but softer now, less cutting. "I know you have. You've done an incredible job keeping everyone alive, but you shouldn't have to do it alone anymore." Cole stood, his joints protesting the movement. "I'll be back before the next dose is due. That's a promise." "You keep saying that word." Mara looked up at him, her young face ancient with accumulated disappointments. "Promises. Like it means something." "It does mean something. It means I'll do what I say or die trying." "Lots of folks have died trying to do things. Dying don't make you special." Cole couldn't help but smile at that brutal honesty. "You're absolutely right. But keeping my word while staying alive, that would be special, so I guess I better manage both." Ben stirred from his corner, his twisted leg pulled close to his body. "Where you going to find work? Town don't exactly welcome strangers, especially not Confederate soldiers with no references." The bartender mentioned a ranch. "Widow Crane," he said. "Pays fair for honest labor." "Matilda Crane." Ben's expression grew complicated. "She's got the biggest spread in the territory. Tough as iron and twice as sharp. If she'll hire you, the work will be hard, but the pay's honest. But she don't suffer fools, and she sure don't take charity cases." "Good thing I'm not asking for charity then. Just work." Noah spoke up from his shadowed corner, his careful diction precise despite the early hour. "Mrs. Crane employs 2 black ranch hands. Treats them same as the white workers, or so folks say. That makes her different from most." "Different how?" "Different like she judges a man by his work instead of his skin. Different, like she told Reverend Crow to his face that his orphan placement scheme was legalized slavery, and she wanted no part of it. Noah's eyes held a flicker of something that might have been respect. She's got power in this territory, money and land and the kind of reputation that makes people listen when she talks. Cole filed that information away. An ally with power and principle could be invaluable, assuming he could convince her to become an ally in the first place. Then, I guess I better make a good impression. The walk to Crane Ranch took Cole through Silver Creek's main street, and he felt eyes on him every step of the way. Word had spread, apparently. The stranger in Confederate gray who'd forced Dr. Hartwell to treat the Hollis orphans, who'd spent the night at their cabin while a child fought for her life. The townspeople's stares carried a mix of curiosity and disapproval, with judgment clearly winning. Cole kept his head up and his stride steady. He'd endured worse scrutiny from better people. These folks had watched children starve and convinced themselves it was someone else's responsibility. Their opinions held no weight with him. The bakery door opened as he passed, and Hannah Thorne emerged with a basket covered in checkered cloth. "Mr. Ryder, how's Faye?" "Fever's down slightly. Still critical, but fighting." "Thank God." Hannah fell into step beside him. "Where are you headed?" "Crane Ranch. Looking for work." "Good choice. Matilda Crane is one of the few decent people left in this territory." Hannah's voice dropped. "Fair warning, though. Reverend Crow knows what you did last night. He's not pleased. He stopped by the bakery this morning asking questions about you. Who you are, where you came from, what your intentions are with his orphans." Cole's jaw tightened. "They're not his anything." "Try telling him that. Crow's got legal standing as their guardian appointed by the town council. You're a drifter with no ties, no money, and no authority. In a dispute, the law favors him every time." "Then I'll change the circumstances. Get work, get money, get standing." Cole stopped, turning to face Hannah directly. "I need to ask you something. Why are you helping? You said last night you were tired of looking away, but there's more to it than that. What's your stake in this?" Hannah was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. "I had a son, Thomas. He died 4 years ago, age 7, from scarlet fever. My husband couldn't bear the loss, started drinking, got mean, finally just disappeared one night and never came back. I've been alone since." She met Cole's gaze. "When I look at those Hollis children, I see my Thomas. I see all the love I've got stored up with nowhere to put it. Maybe that makes me selfish, wanting to help them for my own sake. But selfish or not, I can't watch another child suffer when I've got the means to help. That's not selfish, that's human. Sometimes I wonder if there's a difference." Hannah adjusted the basket on her arm. "I'm taking this food out to the cabin. You go charm Matilda Crane into giving you work. And Cole, don't mention the children right away. Matilda's got a soft spot for the helpless, but she hates being manipulated. Let her see you're a good worker first, then tell her about your situation. Appreciated." Crane Ranch sprawled across a valley that looked like it had been carved specifically to showcase the harsh beauty of Wyoming territory. Grassland stretched in golden waves, broken by dark clusters of cattle and the occasional stand of cottonwood marking where water collected. The main house was substantial, 2 stories of whitewashed wood with a wide porch, built to withstand the weight of winter snows and the fury of spring storms. But it was the woman on the porch who commanded Cole's attention. Matilda Crane stood with the posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime demanding respect and receiving it. She was perhaps 50, with iron gray hair pulled back severely, a face carved by sun and wind into something beyond conventional beauty, and eyes that assessed Cole with the cold precision of a field marshal evaluating troops. "You're the Confederate who's been causing talk in town." Her voice carried clear across the yard, pitched to be heard over wind and distance. "Come closer. I don't shout at strangers." Cole approached the porch, removing his hat. "Yes, ma'am. Cole Ryder. Matilda Crane. You can call me Mrs. Crane or ma'am. Nothing else." She studied him openly, her gaze cataloging everything from his worn boots to his threadbare jacket to the exhaustion carved into his features. "You look like hell." "Haven't slept in about 30 hours, ma'am. Apologies if I'm not at my best." "Why haven't you slept?" Sick child needed watching. Matilda's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "The Hollis girl. Word is she was dying until you dragged Hartwell out there at financial gunpoint. Hannah Thorne's money, not mine. I just provided the motivation." "And the all-night vigil? Who paid for that?" "Nobody. That was just necessary. Necessary. Matilda descended the porch steps, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body had absorbed decades of hard work and harder weather. She circled Cole slowly, her assessment thorough and unsettling. You've got soldiers bearing, even exhausted. Confederate, from the jacket, combat experience, from the way you position yourself, always aware of exits and approaches. And something else. She stopped in front of him. Desperation. Not the hungry kind, the worst kind. The kind that comes from having nothing left to lose. Cole held her gaze. Is that a problem, ma'am? Depends on what you plan to do with that desperation. I've seen men with nothing to lose become heroes. I've also seen them become monsters. She crossed her arms. Which are you planning to be? Neither. I'm just planning to keep some promises I made. To those children. Yes, ma'am. Promises like what? Cole chose his words carefully, remembering Hannah's warning about manipulation. Medicine for the sick one, food and real shelter for all of them, and protection from people who'd split them up or ship them off for profit. Matilda's eyebrows rose slightly. That's a tall order for a broke drifter with no prospects. Yes, ma'am, which is why I need work. I can handle cattle, horses, repairs, whatever you need. I'll work harder than any man you've got, and I won't complain about the hours or the conditions. All I ask is fair wages and the chance to prove I'm worth keeping on. You know anything about ranching? I grew up on a farm in Tennessee. Different from ranching, I know, but I understand livestock and hard work. I can learn the rest. Matilda turned away, staring out at her land with the proprietary gaze of someone who'd fought for every acre and knew its value in blood and sweat. I heard about your promises to those children. Whole towns heard by now. You know what else I heard? That Reverend Crow's already filing legal papers to formalize his guardianship. That he's got placements arranged back east for all 5 of them. That he's mad as hell about your interference. Cole's hands clenched at his sides. Then I need to move faster than he does. You need to be smart, not fast. Crow's got the law on his side, the town council backing him, and a financial incentive to see those children shipped east before you can build any counterclaim. Matilda faced him again. You want to save those kids? You need 3 things: steady employment to prove you can provide for them, housing suitable for a family, and legal standing to challenge Crow's guardianship. Right now you've got none of those things. Which is why I need this job, ma'am. I can give you employment. I've got a foreman's cabin that's been empty since last year. Small, but sound and weatherproof. 2 rooms, a good stove, solid roof. She paused, and Cole felt his heart accelerate with desperate hope. But here's what I can't give you. Legal standing. You're an unmarried man with no family ties, no history in this territory, and no formal relationship to those children. In the eyes of the law, you're nobody to them. The hope crashed hard. There must be something. Let me finish. Matilda's voice sharpened. I said I can't give you legal standing, but I can give you something almost as useful, my influence. I sit on the town council, I have relationships with the territorial judge, and I've made it my business to know exactly how much money Crow's made selling orphans east over the past 3 years. Information like that, presented properly, can change a lot of minds. Cole stared at her, scarcely daring to believe what he was hearing. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of watching this territory rot from the inside. Because Silas Crow is a parasite wrapped in a Bible, and I've wanted him gone for years but needed the right leverage. And because... Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. Because I had children once. 3 boys. Lost 2 to scarlet fever, 1 to a riding accident. My husband died 6 years back, and I've got all this land and money and not a damn person to leave it to. She met his eyes directly. So maybe I'm helping those kids, or maybe I'm helping myself by having something to fight for again. Either way, we both get what we need. Thank you. The words felt inadequate for the magnitude of what she was offering. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. You've still got to earn this. Matilda gestured toward the barn. My foreman's name is Jack Morrison. Tell him I'm hiring you on trial basis, starting pay of $30 a month plus housing. You work sunrise to sunset for the next week, prove you're worth keeping, and we'll talk about making it permanent. You understand? Yes, ma'am. And Ryder? She caught his arm as he turned to go. Those children have been through hell. They don't need another person making promises he can't keep. You commit to this. You commit all the way. No running when it gets hard, no backing out when you realize how much work 5 traumatized kids actually requires. You're either all in or all out. Which is it? Cole thought of Faye's labored breathing, Mara's knife held in trembling hands, Ben's ancient eyes, Noah's careful dignity, Lily's profound silence. He thought of his daughter Sarah, dead because he hadn't been there when she needed him. He thought of all the promises the war had forced him to break, all the brothers in arms he'd failed, all the ways he'd proven himself inadequate to the task of being human. All in, he said. No matter what it takes. Matilda studied him for one more long moment, then nodded. Then get to work. And when you're done for the day, bring those children here. That cabin they're in isn't fit for rats. They can stay in the foreman's cabin until we sort out the legal situation. Ma'am, I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I'm telling. Now stop arguing with the woman who's trying to help you and go prove you're worth the trouble. The barn was a cathedral of dust motes and animal heat, smelling of hay and leather and honest sweat. Jack Morrison turned out to be a weathered man in his 40s with the bow-legged walk of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than on foot. He listened to Cole's introduction with skeptical silence, then handed him a pitchfork. Stalls need mucking, 20 horses plus the spare stalls. When you're done with that, there's fencing down on the south pasture needs mending. After that, we'll see if you're still standing. Cole took the pitchfork. Yes, sir. The work was brutal in the climbing heat. Each stall was a small hell of packed manure and soiled straw, the ammonia smell strong enough to burn his throat. Cole's shoulders screamed after the first 3 stalls. His back joined the protest after 5, and by the time he finished the 10th, he'd stopped feeling individual muscles in favor of one continuous ache. But he kept working. He'd endured worse in the war, forced marches through Georgia mud, digging trenches in frozen Virginia ground, burying the dead in soil that didn't want to receive them. This was just pain, and pain was temporary. His promises were not. The other ranch hands watched him with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. A few offered grudging nods of respect as the hours wore on, and Cole didn't slow down. One man, older, with dark skin and scars that spoke of a hard life, approached during the brief water break Morrison allowed. Name's Samuel, he said, offering a dipper of cool water from the well. You're the man helping the Hollis kids. Trying to. Noah mentioned you. Says you spoke to him same as the white children, like he mattered. Samuel's eyes were sharp and assessing. That true? He does matter, same as any of them. Most white folks don't think so. Most white folks won't even acknowledge Noah exists, let alone that he's got the same right to safety and family as those white children. Samuel handed over the dipper. If you're serious about taking those kids on, you need to know what you're signing up for. People in Silver Creek already hated those children for being poor and orphaned. Adding Noah to the mix, a black boy living with a white family, that's going to make it worse. I don't care what people think. You should care, because what people think becomes what people do. They'll make it hard for you to find work, hard to buy supplies, hard to just exist in peace. They'll call you names, race traitor being one of the kinder ones. They'll question your judgment, your morals, your fitness to raise white children. Samuel's voice was matter of fact, delivering brutal truths without emotion. You think you can handle that? Cole met his gaze steadily. I made a promise to all 5 of them. That includes Noah. If people don't like it, that's their problem, not mine. Something like approval flickered across Samuel's face. Then you might actually have a chance at this, but you'll need allies. Mrs. Crane's one, and she's worth 10 regular folks. I'll spread word among the hands here that you're solid. Won't stop the trouble, but might slow it down some. I appreciate that. Don't appreciate it yet. Just don't prove me wrong about you. Samuel turned back toward the barn. And Ryder? Those kids have been abandoned by every adult in their lives. You walk away from them, even for a good reason, even because things got too hard. That'll break something in them that can't be fixed. So you better be sure before you make promises you might not keep. I'm sure. By the time the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Cole had mucked all 20 stalls, mended a quarter-mile of fence line, hauled water for the livestock, and helped repair a broken wheel on one of the ranch wagons. Every muscle in his body throbbed with exhaustion. His hands were covered in blisters that had burst and bled, and he'd drunk enough water to make himself sick. But he'd proven he could work. Morrison found him as he was finishing with the wagon wheel. You're still standing? Yes, sir. Most men would have quit after the stalls. Confederate pride keeping you upright, or genuine stubbornness? Just keeping my word, Morrison grunted, something that might have been approval. Mrs. Crane says you're moving the Hollis children into the foreman's cabin tonight. That true? If she's willing to allow it, yes. She's willing. Already had the place aired out and cleaned, sent one of the hands to deliver basic supplies. Beds, blankets, dishes. Morrison handed Cole a key. Cabin's a quarter-mile that direction, near the creek. 2 rooms like she said, stone fireplace, good windows. Roof's solid, walls are tight. It'll do for a family. Cole took the key. Its weight somehow more significant than mere metal. Thank you. Don't thank me. I think you're 10 kinds of fool for taking on 5 damaged kids with no money and a whole town ready to fight you over it. But Mrs. Crane sees something in you worth backing, and I trust her judgment more than my own skepticism. Morrison's weathered face creased into something that wasn't quite a smile. You show up tomorrow ready to work this hard again, and I'll consider keeping you on permanent. You prove you can actually manage those kids without everything falling apart, and I'll help you fight Crow when the time comes. Deal? Deal. The walk back to the Hollis cabin felt shorter despite Cole's exhaustion. He had work, wages, and a real place for the children to live. 3 crucial pieces of the impossible puzzle he'd committed himself to solving. The legal battle with Crow still loomed, massive and threatening, but for the first time since making his promises, Cole felt like he might actually have a chance at keeping them. Hannah was leaving as he arrived, her empty basket swinging from one arm. Faye's fever dropped another degree. She's not conscious yet, but her breathing's easier. Dr. Hartwell came by around noon. Mrs. Crane sent him, paid for a follow-up visit. He says if she makes it through tonight, she'll likely pull through. That's good. That's really good. Cole felt something in his chest loosen slightly. I've got news. Mrs. Crane hired me on at the ranch, and she's letting us use the foreman's cabin. It's ready now. Beds, supplies, everything. I'm moving the children tonight. Hannah's face lit up with genuine joy. Cole, that's wonderful. Those kids will finally have a real home. For now, anyway. Crow's still got legal standing, and Matilda says he's already filing papers to formalize his guardianship. Then we fight him. You, me, Matilda, anyone else with a conscience and a spine. Hannah's voice turned fierce. That man has profited off suffering children long enough. It's time someone stood up to him. Inside the cabin, the children were waiting. Mara stood as Cole entered, her body tense with the automatic wariness that came from too many disappointments. You came back, she said, and Cole heard the faint surprise beneath the words. I said I would. He crouched beside Faye, checking her forehead with the back of his hand. Hannah was right. The fever had dropped noticeably. How's she been? Sleeping mostly, woke up once and drank some water. Didn't know where she was or who we were, but she drank. Mara's voice caught. That's good, right? That she's drinking? That's very good. Means her body's fighting. Cole stood, addressing all the children now. I've got news. I found work at Crane Ranch, and Mrs. Crane is letting us use a cabin on her property. It's got real beds, a working stove, tight walls. We're moving there tonight. Silence. The children exchanged those wordless glances Cole was beginning to recognize, a full conversation happening in the space between heartbeats. Finally, Ben spoke. What's the catch? No catch. There's always a catch. Nobody gives away housing for free. Mrs. Crane's not giving it away. She's letting me use it as part of my wages. I work for her, I earn the right to live there, and you all come with me because you're my responsibility now. Cole met each child's eyes in turn. This isn't charity. This is me keeping my second promise. Real shelter for all of you. And when Reverend Crow finds out? This from Noah, his careful voice edged with fear. He won't let us just leave. He's got papers, legal authority. Then we'll fight him with papers and legal authority of our own. Mrs. Crane sits on the town council and knows the territorial judge. She's willing to help us fight for your custody. Cole kept his voice steady, projecting confidence he only partly felt. But first, we get you somewhere safe. Somewhere Crow can't just walk in and take you whenever he wants. Agreed? Mara looked at her siblings, then back to Cole. If we do this, if we trust you and move to this cabin, what happens when you change your mind? When you decide 5 kids is too much trouble and you want your life back? The question hung in the air, heavy with every abandonment these children had endured. Cole could have offered easy reassurances, made promises about forever that might or might not hold true. Instead, he chose honesty. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I'll make mistakes, get things wrong, probably mess up more than I succeed. What I can promise is I won't abandon you. Not when things get hard, not when the whole town turns against us, not when Crow makes his move. I'm in this until you're safe and settled and don't need me anymore." He paused. "That's the best promise I can make. Not that everything will be easy, but that I'll be here through the difficult parts." Mara's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Nobody's ever said that before. About staying through the hard parts. Then they were fools. The hard parts are when you need people most. Lily approached Cole slowly, her small hand reaching out to touch his sleeve. She still didn't speak, but her eyes held a question. "Yes," Cole said, somehow understanding. "You can trust this. I know it's scary, and I know you've been hurt before, but this is real. I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere." The child threw her arms around his waist, her thin body shaking with silent sobs. Cole held her carefully, one hand stroking her tangled hair, while something in his chest cracked open. All the grief he'd carried since Sarah died. All the love he'd locked away because caring meant risking pain. All the parts of himself he'd tried to kill flooding back in a rush that left him breathless. The move happened quickly once the decision was made. The children had few possessions, some threadbare clothes, a few battered toys, a family Bible that was more sentiment than practical use. Cole fashioned a stretcher from an old blanket and carried Faye with painful care, her fevered weight almost nothing in his arms. The other children walked in a tight cluster, their bodies unconsciously drawing together for mutual protection even as they moved towards safety. They'd learned in these brutal months that the world was dangerous and adult promises were lies, and no amount of good intentions could erase that knowledge. But they walked anyway, because even damaged hope was better than no hope at all. The foreman's cabin was better than Cole had dared imagine. 2 rooms, as Matilda had said, connected by an open archway. The main room held a cast-iron stove that radiated warmth even unlit, a sturdy table with 6 chairs, and windows with real glass that let in the fading evening light. The bedroom had 4 narrow beds with clean blankets, plus a larger bed in the corner, clearly meant for Cole. Someone had left supplies on the table: bread, cheese, salted meat, coffee, sugar, dried beans. Basic provisions, but more food than these children had seen in months. Mara touched the table's surface reverently, her fingers tracing the clean wood. "This is real?" "This is real." Ben tested one of the beds, lowering himself carefully with his twisted legs stretched out. "Mattress ain't just straw, it's actual padding." Noah stood frozen in the doorway, as if crossing the threshold might break some spell and return them all to the rotting cabin and its summer heat. "Why is Mrs. Crane doing this? She don't know us. We're nothing to her. Maybe she remembers what it's like to need help. Or maybe she just believes some people deserve better than they've gotten." Cole settled Faye into one of the beds, arranging the blankets around her slight form. "Does it matter why, as long as the help's genuine? It matters because if we don't understand why people help, we can't tell when they're lying." Noah finally stepped inside, his movements cautious. "Every adult who ever promised to help us had their own reasons. The Millers wanted free labor. The Johnsons wanted to look charitable for the church. Reverend Crow wants money. Everyone's got an angle." "You're right. Everyone does have reasons for what they do." Cole met the boy's skeptical gaze. "My reason is I failed my own daughter, and I can't live with that failure unless I do better for someone else's children." Mrs. Crane's reason is she lost her sons and needs something to fight for. Hannah Thorne's reason is she lost her boy and has love with nowhere to put it. Maybe those are selfish reasons, but they're honest ones. We're not pretending to be saints. We're just people trying to do something right for once. Noah considered this, his intelligent eyes searching Cole's face for deception. "And when your guilt's satisfied, when you've done enough good deeds to feel better about your daughter, what happens to us then?" The question cut deep because it was exactly the kind of ruthlessly logical thinking that kept traumatized children alive. Cole had no easy answer, no guarantee that his commitment would outlast his grief or his need for redemption. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't know if my guilt will ever be satisfied or if doing right by you will make me feel better about Sarah. What I do know is this: taking care of you isn't a temporary fix for my broken soul. It's a commitment I made, and I honor my commitments long after they stop being convenient or comfortable. That's just who I am." Pretty words. "Then watch my actions instead. Judge me by what I do, not what I say. That's fair, isn't it?" Slowly, Noah nodded. "Fair enough." They shared a simple meal as the sun set, bread and cheese and cold well water that tasted like luxury after months of rationed food and tainted creek water. The children ate slowly, savoring every bite, occasionally looking around the cabin as if expecting it to vanish like a desert mirage. Cole administered Faye's medicine on schedule, noting with relief that she swallowed more easily now, her body relaxing into genuine sleep rather than fevered unconsciousness. He'd keep watch through the night again, his third without sleep, but that seemed a small price for keeping his first promise. As darkness settled over the ranch, Mara approached Cole, where he sat beside Faye's bed. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. When you look at all of us together, what do you see?" Cole thought about that question, about the real answer versus the easy one. "I see 5 survivors who've endured more than most adults face in a lifetime. I see strength and loyalty and the kind of fierce love that keeps people alive when everything else says they should give up. I see a family that nobody gave you permission to be, but you built it anyway." He paused. "Why do you ask?" "Because most people see problems, see mouths to feed and bodies to clothe and reasons we can't all stay together. They look at Ben's leg and see a cripple, look at Lily's silence and see something broken, look at Noah and see a black boy who doesn't belong with white children, look at Faye and see weakness. Look at me and see a wild girl too mean to civilize." Her voice hardened. "I need to know if that's what you see too." "That's not what I see at all." Cole held her gaze. "I see Ben's leg and know he's fought through pain every day just to keep standing. I see Lily's silence and understand she's been through trauma that would destroy most people. I see Noah and think he's the bravest person I've met, choosing to stay with you despite knowing it makes his life harder. I see Faye fighting pneumonia with everything she's got. And I see you carrying responsibility that would break grown men, doing it without complaint, keeping your siblings alive through sheer willpower." He smiled slightly. "You're not problems, Mara. You're miracles. All of you." Tears spilled down her cheeks, the first time Cole had seen her cry openly. "Don't say that if you don't mean it." "I mean every word." She nodded, wiping her face with rough, angry movements. "Then I guess we'll give you a chance. But I'm keeping the knife close, just in case." "Wouldn't expect anything less." Later, after the children had settled into their beds, real beds with real mattresses, Cole sat at the table in the main room, drinking coffee and watching the moon rise through the glass windows. His body screamed for sleep, but his mind refused to quiet, running through everything that still needed to happen. The legal fight with Crow would be brutal. The man had the law, the town council, and financial incentive all on his side. Cole had a week-old promise and the backing of one powerful woman. Not exactly balanced odds. But Cole had survived worse odds. He'd survived battles where the Confederate lines had been outnumbered 3-1, where victory had seemed impossible until it wasn't. He'd survived losing his daughter, his wife, his home, and his reason to keep living. He'd survived 3 years of drifting through a world that didn't want him, looking for oblivion and finding only more emptiness. This, at least, was a fight worth having. These children were worth fighting for. And for the first time since Appomattox, Cole Ryder had something he'd thought he'd never feel again, a reason to win. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Reverend Crow would make his move, the town would line up to judge and condemn, the legal system would grind forward with its inexorable machinery of paperwork and precedent. But tonight, 5 children slept safely in real beds under a solid roof, their bellies full and their immediate future secure. One promise kept, 2 more to go. And Cole intended to keep them all, no matter what it cost him. Because some promises weren't just words, they were the foundation of everything that made a person worth being. He drained his coffee and stood, his body protesting the movement. Time to keep watch over Faye, to make sure her improving condition held steady. Time to stay awake another night, because that's what guardians did. They stayed vigilant while those under their protection rested. Through the bedroom doorway, he could hear the children's breathing, 5 distinct rhythms forming an accidental symphony. Ben's steady and deep, Noah's quick and cautious, Lily's soft and even, Mara's slightly hitched as if she expected to wake to disaster, and Faye's still labored but stronger now, fighting toward health with the same determination her siblings had shown fighting for survival. Cole settled into the chair beside Faye's bed, prepared for another long night. But this time, the vigil felt different. This time, he wasn't watching a stranger's child out of guilt or obligation. He was watching over his family. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like coming home. Dawn came too early, though Cole supposed that was his own fault for not sleeping at all. He'd kept watch through the night as Faye's breathing gradually steadied, her fever continuing its slow retreat. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, her eyes had flickered open, truly open, not the fevered half-consciousness of previous days, and she'd whispered thirsty before drifting back to sleep. That single word had felt like a victory worth celebrating. Now, as pale light filtered through the cabin windows, Cole heard stirring from the children's beds. They woke quietly, cautiously, as if sudden movements might shatter whatever magic had brought them to this place. He watched them realize, one by one, that the cabin was real, that they'd actually slept in beds with blankets, that yesterday hadn't been some cruel dream. Mara was first to emerge, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe braid. She looked younger this way, closer to her actual age of 11, instead of the ancient creature survival had made her. Faye spoke last night, Cole told her, asked for water, knew what she wanted and how to ask for it. Mara's face transformed, hope breaking through her careful neutrality. She's really getting better? She's fighting her way back. Your sister's stronger than she looks. She gets that from our mama. Papa always said Mama was small but mighty, could outlast anyone when it mattered. Mara's voice caught on the memory. He was wrong, though. Mama couldn't outlast the influenza. Sometimes strength isn't enough. Sometimes the world's just cruel and unfair. Cole stood, stretching muscles that had locked up during his night vigil. But Faye's got something your mama didn't. Modern medicine and people who'll fight for her. That makes the difference. The other children filtered out, each drawn to Faye's bedside to witness her improved condition themselves. Even Lily smiled, a small, tentative expression that transformed her solemn face into something heartbreakingly young. Cole set about making breakfast from the supplies Matilda had provided, working the stove with the competence of someone who'd cooked for himself through long campaign seasons. Coffee boiled thick and strong, cornmeal mush bubbled in the pot, and he fried salt pork until the cabin filled with smells that made the children's stomachs growl audibly. They ate in near silence, focused entirely on the miracle of full plates and no rationing. Cole watched them and felt something fierce and protective settle deeper into his chest. These were his now. Not by blood or law yet, but by choice and commitment. His to feed, his to shelter, his to protect from whatever came next. What came next arrived just after breakfast, in the form of Reverend Silas Crow. The man approached the cabin with the confident stride of someone who believed authority was his by divine right. He was perhaps 40, handsome in a smooth way that made Cole instinctively distrust him, dressed in a black suit that was too fine for casual morning visits. His smile was practiced, his eyes calculating. "Well, well," Crow said, stopping at the cabin's threshold. "The children have found new accommodations. How enterprising." Cole stepped out onto the small porch, deliberately blocking the doorway. "Can I help you, Reverend?" "I'm Silas Crow. I've been managing the care of these orphans since their parents' unfortunate passing." His tone was cordial, but carried an edge. "And you must be Mr. Ryder, the Confederate soldier who's been causing such a stir in our peaceful community." "I'm Cole Ryder, yes. As for causing a stir, I just got a sick child some medical attention. Didn't realize that was controversial." "Oh, it's not the medical attention that concerns people. It's the presumption." Crow's smile didn't waver. "These children are under my legal guardianship, appointed by the town council. You've moved them to a new location without my permission or knowledge. That's kidnapping, Mr. Ryder, however well-intentioned." Cole kept his voice level despite the rage building in his gut. The children weren't safe in that collapsing cabin. Mrs. Crane offered better housing, and they accepted. Nobody was kidnapped. "Mrs. Crane." Crow's expression soured slightly. "Yes, I heard she'd inserted herself into this situation. How generous of her to provide housing for children who already have a guardian working to secure their futures." "Futures like what? Factory work back east? Mining operations that kill children every day?" Cole stepped forward, forcing Crow back a pace. "I know about your placement scheme, Reverend. No, you get paid for every child you ship out. That's not guardianship. That's commerce and human suffering." Crow's mask slipped for just a moment, cold fury showing through before the benevolent expression returned. "I provide opportunities for orphaned children who would otherwise starve or turn to crime. Yes, I receive modest finder's fees to offset the considerable expenses of caring for them. That's standard practice, perfectly legal, and frankly, none of your concern." It became my concern when those children nearly died from neglect while you cared for them. Neglect? Crow laughed, sharp and humorless. I brought food regularly, ensured they had shelter, and was in the process of securing permanent placements. That you've decided to play hero doesn't change the legal reality, Mr. Ryder. Those children are mine by law, and I want them returned immediately. No. The word came from behind Cole. Mara stood in the doorway, her knife once again in her hand. We're not going anywhere with you. Mara, dear, this isn't your decision to make. You're a child. A child you were letting starve while you counted your money from the last batch of orphans you sold. Crow's face flushed. That's a vile accusation. It's true, though, isn't it? Ben appeared beside his sister, leaning on his crutch. We heard you talking to that man from the mill last month. Heard you say Noah would fetch extra money because factory owners preferred Negro children for certain tasks. Heard you laughing about it. The Reverend's composure cracked further. You misunderstood. We understood just fine. Mara's voice was ice. You're not taking us anywhere. Not to split us up, not to ship us east, not for any amount of money. We're staying here with Cole. Mr. Ryder has no legal standing. He's a drifter, a former Confederate with no ties to this territory, no means of support, no authority whatsoever. Crow turned back to Cole. I'm being generous by not having you arrested right now. Return the children to my custody, and I'll overlook this unfortunate episode. Refuse, and I'll have the sheriff here within the hour. Cole felt the weight of the moment, the precariousness of their situation. Crow was right about the legal realities. One word from this man and Cole would be in jail, the children back in that rotting cabin, or worse. But surrendering now meant betraying his promises, meant abandoning these kids to a system that saw them as commodities rather than people. I've got work at Crane Ranch, Cole said carefully. Mrs. Crane has provided housing as part of my employment. The children are staying with me because they choose to, and because Mrs. Crane has authorized it on her property. If you've got a legal problem with that arrangement, you can take it up with her. Oh, I intend to. Crow's voice dropped its cordial pretense entirely. And I'll be filing emergency custody papers with Judge Harrison this afternoon. We'll see how confident you are when the law comes for those children. Good day, Mr. Ryder. Enjoy your brief time playing father. He turned and walked away, his back stiff with barely contained rage. Cole watched him go, knowing they'd just made a powerful enemy and started a war they might not win. He's going to take us away. Mara's voice was flat, defeated. He'll get his papers, and the law will side with him. And everything you promised won't matter because the system's built to protect people like him. Maybe, but we're not surrendering without a fight. Cole turned to face the children clustered in the doorway. I need you all to stay here today. Don't go into town, don't talk to anyone except Mrs. Crane or Hannah Thorne. Can you do that? Where are you going? Noah asked. To talk to Mrs. Crane. If Crow's filing papers this afternoon, we need to file our own. Counter his claims, expose his scheme, build a legal case. Cole grabbed his hat from inside the cabin. This isn't over. It's just beginning. He found Matilda in her ranch office, a converted tack room lined with ledgers and maps. She looked up as he entered, her expression grim. Crow was here 20 minutes ago, threatened to sue me for harboring kidnapped children, accused me of interfering with legal guardianship, generally made himself as unpleasant as his nature allows. She set down her pen. I told him to get off my property before I had him removed by force. I don't think he appreciated my tone. He's filing emergency custody papers this afternoon. I know. He made sure to inform me, very smugly. Matilda leaned back in her chair. Here's our problem. Crow has legal standing as appointed guardian. Judge Harrison is a decent man, but he follows the letter of the law. Without evidence of actual abuse or clear misconduct, he'll side with Crow based purely on legal precedent. Then we get evidence. Of what? Neglect's hard to prove when Crow can claim he provided food and shelter, which technically he did, just barely. His placement fees are legal, even if morally repugnant, and Harrison won't care about Crow's motivations if the law supports his position. Cole felt frustration rising. So we just let him take them? Ship them off to factories where they'll work until they're dead or broken? I didn't say that. Matilda opened a drawer, pulling out a thick folder. I said we need evidence. Fortunately, I've been collecting it for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. Letters from families back east whose children Crow placed in situations that resulted in deaths. Financial records showing he's made over $5,000 selling orphans in the past 2 years alone. Testimony from former town council members who questioned his methods but were overruled. She spread the papers across her desk. This is enough to destroy Crow's reputation and likely get him removed as guardian. But it's not enough to give you custody, Cole. You're still an unmarried drifter with no legal relationship to those children. Best case, Harrison removes Crow and appoints someone else. Maybe me, maybe another council member. The children would be safer, but they wouldn't be yours. What if I marry? The words came out before Cole had fully thought them through. Matilda raised an eyebrow. That would strengthen your position considerably. Married couples are heavily favored in custody arrangements, but I assume you don't have a bride waiting somewhere? No, but... Cole stopped, an idea forming. Hannah Thorne. She's widowed, respected in the community, runs a successful business, and she cares about those kids. You're suggesting a marriage of convenience. Matilda's tone was neutral, assessing. It would work legally, assuming Hannah agreed. Combined with my evidence against Crow, it might be enough to secure custody. But Cole, that's asking Hannah to tie her life to yours for the sake of 5 children she barely knows. That's a significant sacrifice. I know, but it's worth asking. Cole met her eyes. Those kids deserve a chance at a real life. If marrying Hannah gives them that chance, I'll do it. And what about what you deserve? What Hannah deserves? Marriage isn't something to enter lightly, even for noble reasons. I stopped thinking about what I deserve when my daughter died. Now I just think about what's right. Cole straightened. Where can I find Hannah? The bakery, probably, but Cole... Matilda stood, her expression serious. Make sure she understands what she's agreeing to. Make sure you both go into this with clear eyes about what it means and what it costs. Desperation makes people do foolish things, and I'd hate to see 2 decent people ruin their lives trying to save others. Noted. And thank you, Matilda, for the evidence, for the support, for giving us a fighting chance. Don't thank me yet. We've still got to win in court, and Harrison's not easily swayed once he's made up his mind. But we'll give it everything we've got. The walk to Silver Creek felt longer than it should have, weighted with the magnitude of what Cole was about to propose. Marriage. He'd been married once, to Mary, and it had been good until the war destroyed everything. The thought of entering that bond again, even pragmatically, stirred up memories he'd tried hard to bury. But this wasn't about him. This was about 5 children who needed stability and legal protection. If marrying Hannah gave them that, his personal discomfort was irrelevant. The bakery smelled like yeast and sugar, a small piece of warmth in a hard world. Hannah looked up from kneading dough, her flour-dusted hands pausing at the sight of Cole's expression. What's wrong? Crow's filing emergency custody papers this afternoon. He wants the children back, and the law supports his claim. Cole removed his hat, turning it in his hands. Matilda has evidence that could destroy him, but that doesn't give me legal standing to keep the kids. I'm still nobody to them in the eyes of the law. So what do we do? Cole took a breath. We get married. You and me. Create a stable family unit that the court can't easily dismiss. Combined with Matilda's evidence against Crow, it might be enough to secure custody. Hannah's hand stilled completely. You're proposing marriage. A practical marriage, yes. I'm not asking for romance or love or anything beyond a legal partnership focused on protecting those children. The words came out rushed, desperate. I know it's a huge ask. I know I'm asking you to tie your life to a broke soldier with no prospects beyond ranch work. But Hannah, those kids need us. They need the legal protection that marriage would provide. She wiped her hands on her apron slowly, her face unreadable. How long have we known each other, Cole? 2 days? 2 days. And you're proposing marriage. A laugh escaped her, slightly hysterical. This is insane. I know. You're asking me to marry a man I barely know, to become an instant mother to 5 traumatized children, to make myself a target for Crow's wrath and the town's judgment. She shook her head. This is absolutely insane. I know, Cole repeated, and I wouldn't ask if there was any other way. But there isn't. This is what they need, and I promised them safety. I promised them they wouldn't be split up or shipped off. I can't keep that promise alone. Hannah turned away, staring out the bakery's small window at the street beyond. Silver Creek went about its business, oblivious to the desperation playing out in this flower-scented room. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I told you yesterday I had love with nowhere to put it. that I'd been alone since my husband left and my son died, and I was tired of the emptiness. She turned back to Cole. But marriage? That's not just helping children, Cole. That's intertwining our lives completely. Our finances, our reputations, our futures. You understand that? I do. And you're willing to accept that burden, to be bound to me legally, even if there's no affection between us beyond mutual respect and shared purpose? Cole met her eyes steadily. I spent 3 years drifting because I had nothing worth staying for. Those children gave me a reason to stop drifting. If marrying you keeps them safe, then yes, I'm willing to accept that burden. The question is whether you are. Hannah was silent for a long moment, her expression cycling through fear and doubt, and something that might have been hope. I've been alone so long, she whispered. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be needed for something real, something that mattered beyond selling bread and counting coins. Those children, when I look at them, I see my Thomas. I see the family I lost. And I think maybe this is my chance to have that again, even if it comes in an unconventional package. So that's a yes? That's a probably insane, but I'm going to do it. Anyway, yes. She smiled, tremulous but real. When? Today, if possible. Before Crow's custody hearing, we need to present ourselves to the judge as a unified married couple already caring for the children. Today! Hannah laughed again, that same slightly hysterical edge. I'm getting married today to a man I met 48 hours ago. My mother would die of shock if she were still alive. Will you regret it? She considered the question seriously. Ask me in a year, but right now, in this moment, I think I'm doing the right thing for the right reasons. That's all any of us can hope for, isn't it? They were married 2 hours later in Matilda Crane's ranch house, with the territorial minister who occasionally rode circuit through the area performing the ceremony. Matilda stood as witness, her expression approving despite the rushed nature of the arrangement. The children watched with wide eyes, not fully understanding what was happening but sensing its importance. The ceremony was brief, practical, stripped of romance but carrying its own weight nonetheless. Cole spoke his vows with the same seriousness he'd once pledged his service to the Confederacy. Hannah's voice trembled but held steady, her eyes never leaving his face. I now pronounce you husband and wife. What is joined together, let no man put asunder. And just like that, Cole Ryder had a wife. It felt surreal, like putting on a uniform that didn't quite fit, but would have to do because the battle was already starting and there was no time for alterations. Afterward, Matilda produced a marriage certificate that the minister signed and dated. This should arrive at the courthouse before Crow's custody filing. Harrison will have to consider your married status when he evaluates the case. Thank you, Hannah said, for everything, the quick ceremony, the support, the risk you're taking by going against Crow. Thank you for being brave enough to do what's right instead of what's easy. Matilda turned to Cole. Now comes the hard part. Crow's custody hearing is set for tomorrow morning at 9. You need to prepare testimony, gather any evidence the children can provide about his neglect, and be ready to fight for every inch of ground. Harrison won't make this easy, even with everything in our favor. Cole nodded. We'll be ready. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Cole and Hannah spoke with each child individually, documenting instances of Crow's neglect, recording exact dates when food deliveries had been missed, cataloging the Reverend's visits and his comments about placement fees. Mara proved especially valuable, her sharp memory recalling conversations she'd overheard, threats Crow had made when he thought no children were listening. He told someone on the town council that Noah would be worth double because northern factories prefer colored children for dangerous work. They're more expendable. Mara's voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands shook as she spoke. He laughed when he said it, like Noah was a piece of livestock instead of a person. Hannah's face had gone white. He actually said expendable? Yes, ma'am. Said it more than once. Mara looked at Noah, who sat silent in the corner. That's why we knew we couldn't let him separate us. Because Noah would be the first one gone, sent somewhere awful, and we'd never see him again. Cole felt rage burning cold and focused in his chest. This was what they were fighting, not just legal technicalities, but a system that treated children like commodities, and black children like they were worth even less. Tomorrow, in that courtroom, they'd have to make Judge Harrison see these kids as human beings deserving protection, not problems to be efficiently disposed of. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Cole and Hannah sat at the cabin's small table, the marriage certificate between them like a bridge across uncertain water. "This is strange," Hannah said. "Being married to you but not really knowing you." "We can change that. Ask me anything." "Where did you grow up?" "Tennessee. Small farm outside Nashville. Parents died when I was 16. Cholera took them both. I ran the farm alone for a few years, then met Mary at a church social. We married, had Sarah, tried to build a life." Cole's voice roughened. "Then the war came. I joined up thinking it would be over in months, that I'd be home for harvest. Took 4 years instead, and by the time I made it back, Mary had buried our daughter and drunk herself into an early grave from grief. Farm was gone, sold for taxes. I had nothing left, so I started walking and didn't stop for 3 years." Hannah reached across the table, her hand covering his. "I'm sorry. That's more loss than anyone should carry. What about you? How did you end up in Silver Creek running a bakery?" "I grew up in St. Louis, learned baking from my father who ran a shop there. Married James Thorne when I was 19, moved out here when he decided he wanted to ranch. The ranching failed. James was better at dreaming than doing. We opened the bakery as a fallback, and I discovered I had a talent for it." Her expression darkened. "Thomas was born a year later, perfect, beautiful boy. He died when he was 7, and James couldn't handle it. Started drinking, became violent. One night, he just left. I haven't seen him in 4 years, don't know if he's alive or dead. Got him declared legally dead last year so I could manage the bakery's finances properly. So we're both carrying ghosts. Everyone carries ghosts out here. It's what you do with them that matters." Hannah squeezed his hand. "We're doing something good with ours, Cole. Using our grief to protect living children instead of letting it destroy us. That counts for something." They sat in companionable silence after that, two damaged people bound by legal documents and shared purpose, trying to build something worthwhile from the wreckage of their pasts. It wasn't romance, but it was real. And in that moment, real was enough. Morning came with the weight of impending battle. Cole dressed carefully in his only decent clothes. The Confederate jacket brushed clean, his shirt washed and pressed by Hannah's practiced hands. Hannah wore a simple dress in dark blue, her hair pulled back in a severe bun that made her look older, more maternal. They were presenting themselves as stable, respectable, worthy of raising children. First impressions would matter. The children were subdued, sensing the day's importance. Even Faye, now awake more than asleep and taking liquids regularly, seemed to understand that something significant was happening. Cole crouched beside her bed before they left. "Your brothers and sisters and I are going to talk to a judge today. We're going to make sure you all get to stay together, that nobody splits you up or sends you away. You understand?" Faye's fever-bright eyes studied him seriously. "You're my papa now?" The question hit Cole like a physical blow. "Would you like that?" "Mara says you keep promises. Papas should keep promises." Her small hand found his. "Don't let the mean reverend take us." "I won't. That's a promise." Cole stood, his throat tight. "Lily's going to stay here with you while we're gone. Samuel from the ranch is watching the cabin. You're safe, all right?" "All right." The courthouse was a 2-story brick building that dominated Silver Creek's east side, imposing and authoritative in a way designed to remind people of law's power. Judge William Harrison presided from a chamber lined with law books and territorial statutes, his white hair and stern expression giving him the appearance of an Old Testament prophet dispensing wisdom from on high. Reverend Crow was already present when Cole's group arrived, flanked by 2 town council members and looking confident. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Cole and Hannah enter together, widened further when Matilda Crane followed carrying her thick folder of evidence. "All rise." The Honorable Judge William Harrison presiding. Harrison entered, his robes adding to his judicial gravitas. He surveyed the assembled parties with a gaze that missed nothing. "This is an emergency custody hearing regarding 5 minor children currently in disputed guardianship. Reverend Crow has filed for formal custody, claiming the children were removed from his care without authorization. Mr. and Mrs. Ryder," he paused, consulting papers. "Married yesterday, I see, claim the children are better served in their care with support from Mrs. Matilda Crane. Is that an accurate summary?" "Yes, Your Honor," Crow said smoothly. "These children have been under my legal guardianship for 5 months. I've provided food, shelter, and have been arranging appropriate placements for them back east, where they can receive proper care and education." "Proper care?" Mara's voice rang out. You let us starve. Harrison's gavel came down. Young lady, you will not speak unless addressed directly. Is that understood? Mara subsided, but her glare at Crow could have melted iron. Continue, Reverend Crow. Your Honor, I've done my best with limited resources to care for these orphans. The accommodations were admittedly humble, but adequate. I provided regular food deliveries and was in the process of securing placements when Mr. Ryder interfered, moving the children without my knowledge or consent to Mrs. Crane's property. This constitutes kidnapping, and I'm requesting their immediate return to my custody, along with charges being filed against Mr. Ryder. Harrison turned to Cole. Your response? Cole stood, feeling every eye in the room on him. Your Honor, I found these children living in conditions no animal should endure. The youngest, Faye, was dying from pneumonia that Reverend Crow knew about but did nothing to treat. The cabin was structurally unsound, the food deliveries sporadic at best, and the children were being prepared for shipment to factories back east where they'd be separated and likely worked to death. Those are serious allegations. Do you have evidence? We do, Your Honor. Matilda stood, placing her folder on the table. I have documentation spanning 3 years of Reverend Crow's orphan placement activities. Letters from Eastern families whose children died in factory accidents after Crow placed them. Financial records showing he's received over $5,000 in finder's fees. And testimony from the children themselves about his neglect and the comments he made regarding their value to various employers. Harrison's expression sharpened with interest. This court will examine that evidence. But first, I want to hear from the children. Mara Hollis, please approach. Mara walked to the witness stand with her head high, her young face set with determination. Harrison studied her with an assessing gaze. How old are you, Mara? 11, sir. And you've been caring for your siblings since your parents died? Yes, sir. Someone had to. Tell me about Reverend Crow's care. Did he provide adequate food? Mara chose her words carefully, her voice steady. He brought food maybe twice a week. Bread, sometimes salted pork or beans. Just enough to keep us breathing, but not enough to actually live on. We went to bed hungry most nights. Ben's leg got infected because we didn't have money for medicine, and Crow said we should pray instead of wasting money on doctors. And when Faye became ill? We begged him to get a doctor. He said pneumonia was in the hands of the Lord, and if it was her time, no doctor could change that. She was dying, sir. Reverend Crow knew it, and didn't care because dead children don't need placements. Crow surged to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Sit down, Reverend. Harrison's voice was ice. You'll have your chance to respond. Mara, continue. Cole came and got her medicine. He stayed up all night keeping her alive when Reverend Crow had already written her off as dead. That's the difference, sir. Cole saw us as people worth saving. Reverend Crow saw us as problems to be solved or profits to be made. Harrison made notes, his expression unreadable. Did Reverend Crow ever discuss his placement arrangements in front of you? Yes, sir. We heard him tell a man from a mill that Noah would fetch double the usual fee because factory owners preferred black children for dangerous work, said they were more expendable than white children. Mara's voice hardened. He laughed when he said it, like it was a good business joke. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Harrison's gavel came down hard. Order! This court will have order. He fixed Crow with a stare that could have cut glass. Did you make such a statement, Reverend? Crow's face had gone red. Your Honor, I may have discussed the economic realities of child placement, but these children have twisted my words to serve their own agenda. We'll determine what's twisted and what's truth. Noah Hollis, please approach. Noah walked to the stand with quiet dignity, his careful posture and precise movements a stark contrast to the rage Cole could see burning in his eyes. Noah, you're not a blood relation to the other Hollis children, correct? No, sir. I was living on the streets when Ben found me last winter. The Hollises took me in, treated me like family even though it made their lives harder. Why did it make their lives harder? Noah's smile was bitter. Because I'm black, sir. And Silver Creek doesn't approve of black children living with white families. People stopped helping the Hollises after they took me in. Said they were race traitors, said I should be sent away. Reverend Crow especially wanted me gone. Did he say why? He said I was contaminating the white children, teaching them to disrespect the natural order. But then he found out I could be worth money to the right buyer, and suddenly he was very interested in keeping me around until he could ship me east. Noah's voice stayed level, controlled. I'm worth more dead or exploited than I am alive and free. That's what Reverend Crow taught me about my value in this world." Harrison was silent for a long moment. "And Mr. Ryder, how has he treated you?" "Like I'm human, sir. Like my life matters the same as any other child's. He talks to me same as he talks to Mara or Ben or Lily. Doesn't make distinctions, doesn't treat me like I'm less than or separate from the family." Noah met the judge's eyes directly. "He's the first white man who's ever done that, and I don't want to lose it." The testimony continued for another hour. Ben described his infected leg and Crow's refusal to provide medical care. Lily, prompted by Hannah's gentle questions, wrote her answers on a slate since she still couldn't speak, describing in careful letters how Crow had told her she was damaged goods, unlikely to be placed anywhere respectable. Then Harrison examined Matilda's evidence, page after page, documenting deaths, disappearances, and financial transactions that painted Crow as exactly what he was, a man profiting from vulnerable children's suffering. Finally, Harrison sat back, his expression grave. "Reverend Crow, I've heard testimony indicating severe neglect, financial exploitation, and potentially criminal indifference to children's welfare. How do you respond?" Crow stood, his earlier confidence shattered, but his survival instincts intact. "Your Honor, I've operated within the law at all times. Child placement services are legal and necessary. Yes, I receive fees, but those fees compensate me for months of unpaid care and the expenses of housing and feeding orphans. As for medical care, I have limited funds and had to make difficult decisions about resource allocation." "You let a 5-year-old child nearly die from pneumonia while you sat on $5,000 in placement fees." "I didn't know how serious her condition was." "These children told you. They begged you for help. You refused because a dead child costs less than a living one." Harrison's voice was quiet fury. "I've sat on this bench for 15 years, Reverend Crow. I've seen a lot of ugliness disguised as charity, but using orphan children as merchandise while claiming to serve their interests may be the most reprehensible thing I've encountered." He turned to Cole and Hannah. "Mr. and Mrs. Ryder, you've been married less than 48 hours. You're asking this court to grant you custody of 5 traumatized children, including one who's currently recovering from near-fatal illness. That's an enormous responsibility. Are you prepared to take it on?" Cole stood, Hannah rising beside him. "Yes, Your Honor, we understand the challenges. But those children need stability, safety, and people who see them as family instead of problems. We can provide that." "Can you provide for them financially? 5 children require substantial resources." "I have steady employment at Crane Ranch with housing provided. Hannah owns her bakery outright, generating reliable income. Between us, we can support the children adequately." Harrison considered this, then looked at Matilda. "Mrs. Crane, you're supporting this arrangement?" "I am, Your Honor. I'll personally guarantee the family's financial stability and provide any additional support they require. Those children deserve better than they've gotten, and the Ryders are offering them a genuine chance at a real life." The judge was silent for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. The courtroom held its collective breath. This court finds that Reverend Silas Crow has failed in his duties as guardian, demonstrating a pattern of neglect and financial exploitation that borders on criminal. His guardianship is hereby terminated immediately. Harrison's gavel came down with finality. "Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into his placement activities. Pending that investigation, he is barred from any involvement with orphan care or placement services." Crow's face went ashen. "Your Honor, you can't." "I can, and I have. Be grateful I'm not charging you with child endangerment." Harrison turned to Cole and Hannah. "As for custody, I'm granting provisional guardianship to Mr. and Mrs. Ryder for a period of 6 months. During that time, I'll be conducting regular reviews to ensure the children's welfare. If at the end of 6 months the arrangement is working, I'll finalize the adoption. If not, we'll revisit the matter. Is that acceptable?" "Yes, Your Honor," Cole and Hannah said in unison. "Then this hearing is adjourned." The gavel's final crack echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot marking the end of a battle. Cole felt Hannah's hand find his, her grip tight with relief and residual fear. Matilda was smiling, actually smiling, something Cole realized he'd never seen her do. And the children, clustered together near the back of the room, looked like they'd just witnessed a miracle they didn't quite dare believe in. Crow stormed out without a word, his face twisted with impotent rage. The town council members followed, already distancing themselves from his disgrace. And Cole Ryder, broke soldier with no prospects, found himself suddenly responsible for 5 children and married to a woman he'd met 3 days ago. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like finally, after years of drifting, he'd found something worth the risk of carrying again, worth the pain that would inevitably come, worth staying for. Outside the courthouse, Mara approached Cole and Hannah with the knife still visible at her belt. But instead of wariness, her eyes held something that looked almost like trust. "You kept your third promise," she said quietly. "Nobody's taking us anywhere we don't want to go." "All 3 promises kept," Cole confirmed. "Now we start the hard part, actually building a life together." "Harder than fighting Reverend Crow?" Hannah laughed, reaching out to touch Mara's shoulder gently. "Probably, but we'll figure it out together. That's what families do." Families. Mara tested the word like something fragile and precious. "I guess we're that now. An actual family. Not by blood," Cole said, "but by choice. And sometimes that's even stronger." They walked back to the cabin together, parents and children, bound by promises kept and battles won, facing an uncertain future with something they hadn't had before. Hope that maybe, just maybe, broken things could be made whole again if the right people committed to doing the work. The war had taught Cole that some things, once broken, could never be repaired. But these children, this strange new family built from desperation and determination, were teaching him something different. That healing was possible. That redemption wasn't just a word. And that sometimes the most important victories weren't won with bullets or grand gestures, but with kept promises and the simple courage to show up day after day, doing the hard work of loving broken people back to wholeness. The summer sun beat down on Wyoming territory, harsh and unforgiving as ever. But inside the 4-man's cabin, 5 children and 2 adults who'd been strangers days before began the tentative work of becoming a family. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. And for children who'd survived on scraps of hope and sheer determination, real was everything. The victory in court should have marked the end of their troubles, but Cole knew better than to mistake winning a battle for winning a war. Real life, he'd learned in Tennessee fields and Georgia mud, was what happened after the dramatic moments passed, the slow grind of daily existence where good intentions met harsh reality and either survived or shattered. The first test came that very afternoon when they returned to the cabin. Faye had taken a turn for the worse in their absence, her fever spiking again, her breathing labored and wet. Lily stood beside her sister's bed with tears streaming silently down her face, while Samuel from the ranch hovered nearby looking helpless and terrified. "Happened about an hour ago," Samuel said. "One minute she was sleeping peaceful, next she was burning up and coughing something awful. I didn't know whether to fetch you, or the doctor, or—" "You did right staying with them." Cole was already moving to Faye's bedside, his hand on her forehead confirming what he could see. The fever was back with a vengeance, maybe worse than before. "Hannah, we need cool water and clean cloths. Mara, where's the medicine Hartwell left?" "Almost gone. Maybe 2 doses left." Mara's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Hannah was already working the water pump, her efficient movement speaking to years of handling crises alone. Cole carefully measured out medicine, holding Faye's head as she struggled to swallow, her small body convulsing with coughs that brought up bloody phlegm. "This is bad," Ben said quietly from his position by the door. "Worse than before. Pneumonia sometimes does this. Gets better, then comes back harder. Her body's exhausted from the first fight." Cole kept his voice steady, even as fear clawed at his chest. "We need Hartwell again." "He won't come," Noah said. "Not after what happened in court. We embarrassed Crow, and Hartwell's on the town council with him. He'll refuse out of spite." "Then I'll make him come." Cole stood, rage and desperation warring in his chest. "Samuel, stay with the children. Hannah, keep her cool and give the last dose in 4 hours if I'm not back. I'm getting that doctor here if I have to drag him by his damned collar." The ride to town on one of Matilda's horses took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Cole's mind raced through scenarios, bribing Hartwell, threatening him, appealing to whatever shred of medical ethics might still exist beneath the man's mercenary exterior. None of the options seemed promising, but Faye didn't have time for promising. She had time for whatever worked. The doctor's office was closed when Cole arrived, a hand-lettered sign declaring office hours over for the day. Cole didn't bother knocking. He tried the door, found it locked, and kicked it open with a violence that splintered the frame. Hartwell appeared at the top of the stairs, his face flushed with outrage. "What in hell do you think you're—" Faye Hollis is dying again. Her pneumonia's come back worse than before, and she needs treatment now. Cole's voice was flat, dangerous. You're coming with me. I certainly am not. You people humiliated Reverend Crow in court today, undermined the town council, and now you break into my office making demands. Get out before I have you arrested. Cole mounted the stairs 2 at a time, backing Hartwell against the wall with the sheer force of his presence. A 5-year-old child is suffocating on her own lungs while you stand here worried about your pride and your council politics. You're a doctor. Your job is saving lives, not playing petty revenge games. My job is whatever I decide it is. I don't work for you, Ryder, and after today's performance, I don't work for any of you Hollis lovers anymore. Hartwell tried to push past him. Now get out of my office. Cole's hand shot out, grabbing the doctor's shirt front and slamming him back against the wall. Listen to me very carefully. That child has maybe hours, possibly less. You let her die out of spite, and I will make sure everyone in this territory knows you could have saved her and chose not to. I'll tell the story in every town from here to Montana, ruin your reputation so thoroughly you'll never practice medicine anywhere again. You have no proof. I have 5 children who'll testify you refused treatment. I have Hannah Thorne who'll confirm it. I have Matilda Crane's money and influence to spread the word far and wide. Cole leaned closer, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute. You think losing Crow's friendship is bad? Wait until every mother in 3 territories knows you let a little girl die because her guardians won't play politics. Your practice will be finished. Hartwell's face had gone pale. You're threatening me? I'm promising you, same way I promised those children they'd be safe. I keep my promises, Doctor, every single one of them. For a long moment they stood frozen, Cole's hand fisted in expensive cotton, Hartwell pressed against flowered wallpaper, the weight of a child's life hanging between them. Then the doctor's shoulders sagged. Let go of me. I'll get my bag. The ride back seemed longer despite pushing the horses harder. Hartwell sat rigid in the saddle, his medical bag strapped across his chest, his face set in lines of resentment and fear. Cole didn't care about the man's feelings. He cared about Faye breathing come morning. At the cabin, Hartwell examined his patient with professional detachment, listening to her lungs, checking her throat, taking her temperature. His expression grew grimmer with each observation. The infection spread. She needs stronger medicine than what I gave before, and she needs constant monitoring. The fever has to be controlled, or it'll cause brain damage, assuming she survives at all. What do you need? Hannah asked. Quinine, laudanum, willow bark extract. Stronger concentrations than I carry normally. I'll have to mix them special. Hartwell pulled vials from his bag, measuring with practiced precision. This will help with the fever and pain, make breathing easier. But she's critically ill, Mrs. Ryder. You understand that? This could go either way. Just do your job, Cole said. They worked through the evening in shifts. Cole and Hannah alternated between bathing Faye with cool water, administering medicine, and trying to keep her comfortable while her small body fought its desperate battle. The other children helped where they could, Mara keeping water heated for steam treatments, Ben reading aloud in his steady voice because Hannah said familiar sounds might give Faye something to hold on to, Noah watching the clock to ensure medicine came on schedule. Even Lily contributed, sitting beside her sister's bed and holding her hand with the fierce concentration of someone willing strength through touch alone. Cole watched them all and felt something fierce and protective settle deeper into his bones. This was his family now. These children depending on him, trusting him to keep them safe, even when safety seemed impossible. Hartwell stayed through the night, monitoring Faye's condition with the kind of professional focus Cole had to admit was impressive, despite his personal dislike of the man. Around 3 a.m, as Faye's breathing grew more labored and her fever climbed toward dangerous heights, the doctor pulled Cole aside. I've done everything I can. The rest is up to her constitution and whatever providence governs these things. You should prepare the other children for the possibility. No. Cole's voice was absolute. She's going to fight through this. She's stronger than you think. Mr. Ryder, I admire your faith, but medical reality is she survived this once already against odds you said were impossible. Medical reality is she's got 4 siblings and 2 adults who need her alive, and that kind of love matters. It has to matter. Hartwell looked at him with something that might have been pity. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes children die despite everyone's best efforts. You should know that, having lost your own daughter. The words hit like a physical blow, but Cole didn't flinch. I do know it. Which is why I'm not losing another child if there's anything at all, that can be done to prevent it. So you keep trying, doctor. You keep fighting for her. Because if she dies and I find out later there was something you could have done but didn't, what I did to your office door will seem gentle compared to what comes next. Dawn came slowly, the summer sky lightening from black to gray to the pale gold of early morning. Faye's fever had climbed so high she was delirious, calling for her mother in a voice that broke Cole's heart. He held her while she thrashed, whispering the same useless promises he'd whispered to Sarah years ago, hoping somehow they'd matter more this time. Hannah sat with Mara, both women holding the girl as she cried silent tears into Hannah's shoulder. Ben had fallen asleep against the wall, exhaustion finally overcoming his vigil. Noah kept watch at the window, his face expressionless but his hands clenched white-knuckled against the sill, and Lily remained at her sister's bedside, still holding that small hand, still willing strength across the fragile connection of touch. Around dawn, Faye's breathing began to change. Not worsening exactly, but shifting to a different rhythm. Hartwell checked her pulse, her temperature, listened again to her lungs. "The fever's breaking," he said, and Cole heard genuine surprise in his voice. "It's actually breaking. I didn't think—" He stopped, shaking his head. "She's not out of danger yet, but this is the turn we needed. If she holds steady for the next 6 hours, she'll likely pull through." The relief was so intense, Cole felt dizzy with it. Hannah was crying openly now, tears of gratitude rather than grief. Mara lifted her head from Hannah's shoulder, her face transformed by desperate hope. "She's really going to be okay?" "I believe so," Hartwell said. "Though she'll need weeks of recovery, careful monitoring, probably another close call or two before she's truly well. Pneumonia doesn't surrender easily, especially not in children this malnourished." "Then we'll keep fighting," Cole said, "however long it takes." Hartwell packed his bag slowly, his movements heavy with exhaustion. "I'll come back this evening to check on her. And Mr. Ryder? What you said earlier about ruining my reputation if I refused to help, you meant that, didn't you? Every word." "I thought so." Hartwell headed for the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you were right. My job is saving lives, not playing politics. I forgot that somewhere along the way. Thank you for the reminder, even if it came wrapped in threats and property damage." After the doctor left, the cabin settled into exhausted relief. The children who'd stayed awake through the night found beds and collapsed into sleep. Hannah made coffee and sat with Cole at the small table, both of them too wrung out for conversation, but needing the comfort of presence. "That was too close," Hannah said finally. "I thought we were going to lose her." "Me too. For about 3 hours there, I was certain we'd done everything right, and it still wouldn't be enough." Cole's hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee cup. "I don't know how parents survive this. The constant fear that no matter what you do, it won't be enough to keep them safe. They survive because they have to, because the alternative is abandoning children who need them, and that's unthinkable." Hannah's voice was steady despite the tears still wet on her cheeks. "We'll survive it too, Cole. One crisis at a time, one day at a time. That's all anyone can do." They sat in silence after that, watching the morning light strengthen through the windows, listening to the children's breathing settle into the peaceful rhythms of exhausted sleep. They'd survived another night. That had to be enough for now. The days that followed established a rhythm that was equal parts chaos and routine. Cole worked sunrise to sunset at the ranch, proving himself to Jack Morrison and the other hands through sheer competence and unwavering work ethic. Hannah managed the bakery in town, rising at 4 each morning to have bread ready for the breakfast crowd, then rushing back to the cabin to help with the children during the afternoon lull. The children themselves began the slow, painful process of learning to be children again instead of survival machines. Ben started walking more confidently on his twisted leg after Hartwell prescribed exercises to strengthen the muscles. Noah began attending the small schoolhouse in town, despite the hostile stares and whispered comments, his chin held high and his determination absolute. Mara slowly surrendered some of her responsibilities, allowing Cole and Hannah to shoulder burdens she'd carried alone for too long. Lily remained silent, but she started drawing, elaborate pictures on scraps of paper that told stories her voice couldn't yet manage. Cole and Hannah quickly learned to read her artwork, understanding that a drawing of storm clouds meant she was frightened, while pictures of sunshine and flowers indicated contentment. And Faye recovered slowly but steadily, her fever staying down, her breathing growing stronger, her appetite returning. Within 2 weeks, she was sitting up in bed, demanding stories and attention with the imperious confidence of a 5-year-old who'd survived death and decided she deserved some spoiling as compensation. But the peace was fragile, and Silver Creek's judgment was harsh. Cole felt it every time he went to town. The stares, the whispered comments, the way conversations died when he approached. The Riders had won in court, but they'd made enemies doing it. Crow's allies on the town council might not have legal power over the children anymore, but they had other ways of making life difficult. The general store owner started charging the family higher prices than other customers, claiming special delivery fees for the ranch location. The bank refused to extend credit to Hannah's bakery despite her excellent payment history. And the school teacher, a pinched woman named Mrs. Aldrich, made it clear Noah wasn't welcome in her classroom. "That boy disrupts the other children," she told Cole when he came to discuss the situation. "His presence makes the white children uncomfortable, raises questions about race mixing and proper social order. I think it would be better for everyone if he pursued his education elsewhere." "Elsewhere like where? There's no other school within 50 miles. Then perhaps private tutoring, or perhaps you should consider that some children simply aren't meant for formal education." Mrs. Aldrich's smile was sugar over poison. "I'm sure Noah is perfectly capable in his own way, but we must think of the other children's welfare." Cole felt rage building but forced himself to speak calmly. "Noah stays in school. Judge Harrison's custody order requires all 5 children receive proper education. If you refuse to teach him, I'll file a complaint with the Territorial Education Board and make sure they know you're discriminating based on race." "Discrimination? I'm simply maintaining appropriate standards. You're violating the law and you know it. Noah stays, or I make this an official problem that brings oversight you don't want. Your choice, Mrs. Aldrich." The teacher's face flushed with anger, but she backed down. "Fine. He can stay. But don't expect me to give him any special treatment or make the other parents happy about it." "I don't expect special treatment, just equal treatment. That shouldn't be too much to ask from an educator." But it was too much, Cole discovered over the following weeks. Mrs. Aldrich obeyed the letter of the law while violating its spirit at every turn. She seated Noah in the back corner alone, called on him less than other students, graded his work more harshly despite his obvious intelligence. The other children followed her lead, isolating Noah during breaks, whispering insults they'd learned from their parents. Noah endured it with quiet dignity that broke Cole's heart. "It's fine," he said when Cole asked how school was going. "I'm learning to read better, learning arithmetic. That's what matters. The rest is just noise." "It's not just noise when people treat you like you're less than human. It's what I'm used to, Cole. At least now I've got a family to come home to that sees me different. That's more than I had before." The simple acceptance in Noah's voice, the resignation to injustice as inevitable, made Cole want to tear something apart with his bare hands. But rage wouldn't change Silver Creek's attitudes or make Noah's life easier. Only time and persistent example might do that, if anything could. The crisis came on a sweltering August afternoon when the heat had turned the world into wavering mirages and shortened tempers. Cole was mending fence on the south pasture when Samuel rode up hard, his horse lathered and blowing. "You need to get to town, now. There's trouble at the bakery." Cole didn't ask questions, just swung onto Samuel's horse and rode. The 5 miles to Silver Creek passed in a blur of pounding hooves and rising dread. Whatever had happened, it was bad enough to pull Samuel away from work in the middle of the day. He found Hannah's bakery surrounded by a hostile crowd, maybe 20 people shouting accusations and threats. The bakery's front window was shattered, glass littering the boardwalk, and Hannah stood in the doorway with Faye clutched against her chest, her face pale but defiant. Cole pushed through the crowd, positioning himself between Hannah and the mob. "What the hell is going on?" A man Cole recognized as one of the town council members stepped forward. "Your wife's been serving spoiled food. My daughter got sick from bread she bought here yesterday, vomiting and fever all night. Others have had similar complaints." "That's a lie," Hannah said. "My bread is fresh every morning. I've never sold spoiled goods in my life." "Then explain why half a dozen families are reporting illness after buying from you." The councilman's voice carried false reasonableness. "Face it, Mrs. Ryder, you've been distracted by those orphans, let your standards slip. People could die from food poisoning." Cole's mind raced. This was too coordinated to be coincidence. The timing, the multiple complaints, the ready-made crowd. This was retaliation for the court case, for embarrassing Crow and his allies. "Anyone can claim illness," he said. Where's your proof the bread caused it? The proof is sick children and your wife's negligence. Another voice from the crowd. She should be shut down before someone dies. I want to see these sick children. I want Dr. Hartwell to examine them and confirm food poisoning versus any other illness. And I want a neutral party to inspect Hannah's bakery and verify her practices. Cole's voice cut through the crowd's anger. You want to close her business? You do it with evidence, not mob accusations. We don't need evidence. You know nothing except what you've been told to believe. Cole turned to face the crowd fully. This is about the custody case, isn't it? About Crow losing and taking you all down with him? You can't touch the children legally anymore, so you're going after our livelihoods instead, trying to destroy us economically because you couldn't do it in court. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few faces showed shame, but most remained hostile. Cole pressed his advantage. You want to shut down Hannah's bakery? Fine. But first you explain to Judge Harrison why you're violating his custody order by trying to bankrupt the family he placed those children with. You explain why you're targeting a business with a spotless reputation based on anonymous complaints that appeared overnight. And you explain it all in court, under oath, where lying has consequences. The councilman's face reddened. You can't threaten us. I'm not threatening. I'm promising. You come after my family's ability to provide for those children, and I'll make it a legal fight that exposes every dirty trick you've pulled, starting with who really organized this mob and why. Cole let his gaze sweep across familiar faces. So who wants to be first to testify under oath about how their child got sick from fresh bread? Who wants to commit perjury for Silas Crow's revenge? Silence. The crowd began to disperse, people finding sudden reasons to be elsewhere. Within minutes, only the councilman remained, his expression murderous. You think you've won something here, Ryder? This town will never accept you or those children. We'll make your lives miserable in ways you can't fight with legal tricks. Then we'll endure misery. We've both survived worse. Cole stepped closer, dropping his voice. But understand this. You come after my family again. I stop playing by rules of evidence and courtroom procedure. I start playing by rules I learned in the war, where the objective is destroying your enemy by any means necessary. You really want to find out what a desperate man with nothing to lose is capable of? The councilman backed away, suddenly uncertain. That sounds like a threat. That's a promise, same kind I made those children about keeping them safe. And I keep my promises. Every single one. After the man left, Cole helped Hannah clean up the broken glass while Faye watched with wide eyes from inside the bakery. His hands shook with residual rage and adrenaline, but he kept his movements steady, controlled. They're going to keep coming after us, Hannah said quietly. They'll find other ways to hurt us that are harder to fight. Probably, but we'll handle it together. Cole met her eyes. I'm sorry you got pulled into this. Sorry marrying me made you a target. I knew what I was choosing when I said yes, and I'd choose it again. Hannah's voice was fierce despite the tears threatening. Those children deserve better than this town's pettiness. We'll find a way to give them that, even if it means fighting every day. We will, Cole agreed, because the alternative is giving up, and that's not something either of us knows how to do. That night, with the children finally asleep and the cabin quiet, Cole and Hannah sat on the small porch watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The heat had finally broken, a slight breeze carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. I've been thinking, Hannah said, about leaving Silver Creek, taking the children somewhere they won't face this constant hostility, where Noah won't be treated like he's worthless, and we won't have to fight just to exist. Where would we go? Somewhere bigger, maybe. Denver or Salt Lake City. Places where we could disappear into the population, where people might be too busy with their own lives to care about ours. She paused. Or we could stay, dig in our heels and refuse to be driven away by small-minded people who mistake cruelty for righteousness. Cole considered both options. Running would be easier in some ways, a fresh start without the accumulated hostility of Silver Creek's judgment. But it would also mean abandoning Matilda's support, his job at the ranch, the fragile stability they'd built. And it would teach the children that running from problems was acceptable, that community hostility couldn't be overcome. I think we stay, he said finally. We make them see us every day, force them to acknowledge we're not going anywhere. Eventually, some of them will get tired of hating us. Maybe even a few will decide we're not worth the effort of sustained hostility. And the ones who never change their minds? We endure them. Same way Noah endures Mrs. Aldrich. Same way we've endured everything else. Cole reached for Hannah's hand, the gesture still slightly awkward between them, but genuine. We've got 6 months before Harrison's final custody review. 6 months to prove we can provide a stable home, despite this town's best efforts to destroy us. After that, the children are legally ours, and it gets harder for anyone to threaten that. We just have to survive until then. Survive? Hannah laughed softly. That seems to be our family specialty. Could be worse specialties to have. They sat in comfortable silence after that, bound by shared purpose and accumulated hardship, two damaged people trying to build something worthwhile from the wreckage of their pasts. The road ahead was uncertain, likely filled with more fights and more crises. But they'd faced down death, legal battles, and mob hostility already. Whatever came next, they'd handle it together. Inside the cabin, 5 children slept peacefully in real beds under a solid roof, their bellies full, and their immediate future secure. They had parents now, not perfect ones, not without their own scars and failures, but people who'd chosen them deliberately, who fought for them consistently, who kept their promises even when those promises came at tremendous cost. And in a world that had taught these children they were disposable, that simple commitment to staying made all the difference. Not because it solved every problem or erased every hurt, but because it proved that some people could be trusted, that some promises actually meant something, that even in the harsh reality of frontier Wyoming, where life was cheap and mercy scarce, there were still adults willing to see children as worthy of protection and love. Cole looked at his calloused hands, worn from ranch work and scarred from old battles. These hands had killed men in the war, had buried his daughter, had done terrible things in service of causes both noble and corrupt. But now they were building something different, a family formed not by blood but by choice, held together by promises kept in battles won and the simple determination to do right by people who deserved better. It wasn't the life he'd imagined when he'd stumbled into Silver Creek looking for oblivion. But it was better than oblivion. It was purpose. It was redemption earned one difficult day at a time. And for a man who'd thought himself beyond saving, that was more than enough. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggle and triumph alike. But down below, in a small cabin on Matilda Crane's ranch, 7 people who'd each known profound loss were learning how to become something more than the sum of their individual damage. Learning that healing was possible if you were willing to endure the pain of it. Learning that family wasn't about perfection, but about showing up consistently, even when it was hard. And in the process, they were proving that sometimes the most important victories weren't dramatic courtroom battles or last-minute rescues, but the quiet persistence of choosing love over convenience, commitment over comfort, and hope over the easier path of surrender. Those victories didn't make headlines or get commemorated in history books, but they mattered just as much, maybe more, because they were built to last beyond any single moment of glory. The August night deepened around them, carrying the promise of storms to come and challenges not yet faced. But for now, in this moment, they were together and they were safe. And that was enough. The storms Cole had sensed that August night arrived 3 weeks later, but not in the form of weather. They came instead as a letter delivered by the territorial marshal, its official seal and legal language announcing that the investigation into Reverend Silas Crow's orphan placement activities had uncovered evidence of criminal fraud, child endangerment, and financial malfeasance spanning multiple territories. The letter requested Cole and the children's testimony at a grand jury hearing scheduled for late September. They found 11 children who died in placements Crow arranged, Matilda explained when she rode out to deliver the news personally. Mill accidents, mine collapses, one boy beaten to death by a factory foreman, and evidence he falsified records to hide the deaths and keep collecting fees from new placements. He's facing federal charges now, not just territorial ones. Cole read the letter again, its words blurring as rage threatened to overwhelm reason. 11 children dead while Crow collected money and smiled his practiced smile. 11 families destroyed while Silver Creek's respectable citizens looked away and called it charity. The children will have to testify? Hannah asked, her voice tight. Only if they're willing. The prosecutor says he has enough evidence without them. But their testimony about conditions here in Silver Creek would strengthen the case considerably. Matilda's expression was grim. It's asking a lot, making them relive trauma in a courtroom full of strangers, but it might prevent other children from ending up in Crow's hands. That evening, Cole gathered the children around the table to explain the situation. He kept his language simple but honest, trusting them to handle truth better than comfortable lies. The government's putting Reverend Crow on trial for what he did to you and other children. They're asking if you'd be willing to tell your stories in court. You don't have to. The prosecutor says he can win without your testimony. But if you want to speak, if you want to make sure people understand what Crow really was, you'll have that chance. Silence settled heavy over the cabin. The children exchanged those wordless glances Cole had learned to recognize as entire conversations compressed into moments. Finally, Mara spoke. If we testify, will it help put him away? Keep him from hurting more kids? The prosecutor believes so, yes. Then I'll do it. Her voice was steady despite her young age. I want people to know we weren't just problems to be solved or products to be sold. We were children who deserved better, and Crow stole that from us. Someone needs to say it out loud where everyone has to listen. Ben nodded agreement. I'll testify too. Let them hear about my leg getting infected while Crow told us to pray instead of getting medicine. Let them know what his charity actually looked like. Noah's voice was quiet but determined. I want to tell them what he said about me being worth more money because I'm black, because factory owners like us for dangerous work. Want them to hear how casually he talked about my life being expendable. Maybe it'll make some people uncomfortable enough to change. Cole looked at Lily, who sat with her drawing paper and charcoal. She drew quickly. A picture of a man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, holding chains behind his back. Then she wrote beneath it in careful letters, I want to show them this. You can, Hannah said gently. The court can accept drawings as testimony if you're more comfortable with that than speaking. Only Faye remained undecided, her small face serious as she considered the question. Will the bad reverend be there? Will I have to see him? He might be, yes, but he can't hurt you anymore. Cole and I will be right there with you, and he'll be behind bars or with guards watching him every second. Faye thought about this, then nodded with the decisive certainty only 5-year-olds could manage. Then I'll tell them he let me almost die. That's important for people to know. Pride and heartbreak warred in Cole's chest. These children had already endured so much, and now they were choosing to endure more for the sake of justice and protecting others. It was brave beyond measure and deeply unfair that such bravery was necessary. You're sure? He asked. All of you? Because once we commit to this, there's no backing out without looking like we're hiding something. The defense will use any hesitation against us. We're sure, Mara said, and her siblings nodded agreement. The weeks before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation mixed with attempts at normal life. The children attended school despite continued hostility from Mrs. Aldrich and several parents. Hannah kept the bakery running despite reduced customer numbers and continued harassment. Cole worked the ranch from dawn to dusk, proving his worth with sweat and stubborn competence. But underneath the routine, tension built like thunderheads on the horizon. The grand jury hearing wasn't just about Crow's guilt. It was about exposing Silver Creek's complicity, about forcing a community to confront its own moral failure. And communities, Cole had learned, rarely appreciated such forced confrontation. The backlash started small. Anonymous notes left on the bakery door warning Hannah to keep her family quiet or face consequences. Supplies ordered for the ranch mysteriously delayed or delivered damaged. The schoolhouse's wood supply, which community families took turns providing, somehow never materialized when it was supposed to come from families friendly with Crow's remaining supporters. Then it escalated. Someone poisoned 2 of Matilda's horses, not fatally, but enough to make them sick and useless for days. The bakery's flour shipment was contaminated with ash, forcing Hannah to throw out an entire week's worth of supplies and profits. And Noah came home from school with a split lip and bruised ribs, courtesy of 3 older boys who'd cornered him behind the schoolhouse while Mrs. Aldrich conveniently looked the other way. Cole found the boys the next morning before school started. He didn't touch them. Didn't need to. He simply positioned himself between them and the schoolhouse door, his presence radiating the kind of controlled violence that came from years of war experience. You 3 put hands on Noah again, and I'll make sure your fathers understand what happens when boys think they can brutalize smaller children without consequences, he said quietly. I won't touch you myself. I'll let your fathers handle discipline. But I'll make sure they know exactly what you did, in detail, publicly, where the whole town hears it. You'll be known as the cowards who ganged up on a 9-year-old boy because he's black, and you thought nobody would care. The oldest boy tried to bluster. You can't prove Noah's injuries prove enough. And unlike you, I've got credibility built on keeping my word and protecting children instead of hurting them. So when I tell your father you're becoming the kind of man who beats up little kids, he'll believe me. Question is whether you want to risk finding out I'm right." They scattered, and Noah had no more trouble at school after that. But the incident crystallized something Cole had been trying to ignore. Silver Creek would never truly accept them. The town's hostility wasn't temporary or surmountable through persistence and good example. It was foundational, built into the community's understanding of itself and its values. "We need to think seriously about leaving after the hearing," he told Hannah that night. "This place is poisoning the children's chance at normal childhood. Every day they face judgment and hostility for things that aren't their fault. That's not sustainable." "Where would we go?" "Somewhere bigger, like you suggested before. Denver, maybe, or even California. Somewhere we could actually build a life instead of constantly defending our right to exist." Cole watched the children through the cabin window, playing some game that involved Lily's drawings and Faye's elaborate storytelling. They deserve better than this constant fight. Hannah was quiet for a moment, her hands busy with mending, but her mind clearly elsewhere. "I've lived in Silver Creek for 8 years. Built my business from nothing, survived my son's death, and my husband's abandonment here. Leaving feels like surrender. It's not surrender if we're choosing better circumstances instead of worse ones. That's just wisdom." "Maybe. Or maybe it's teaching the children that when things get hard, you run instead of standing your ground." She set down her mending, meeting his eyes directly. "What do you think they'd learn from us leaving versus staying?" Cole considered the question seriously. "From leaving, they'd learn that sometimes the right choice is recognizing when a situation is unwinnable and finding better ground. From staying, they'd learn that commitment means enduring hardship even when easier options exist. Both lessons have value. Question is which one serves them better." "I think we let them choose," Hannah said. "After the hearing, after they've testified and done their part for justice, we sit them down and give them honest assessment of both options. Then we abide by their decision as a family." It was a good solution, one that respected the children's agency while maintaining parental guidance. Cole nodded agreement. "After the hearing, then, we'll decide together what comes next." The grand jury hearing was held in Cheyenne, requiring a 2-day wagon journey that left everyone exhausted and anxious. The territorial courthouse was an imposing stone building that made Silver Creek's wooden structure look like a child's playhouse by comparison. Inside, marble floors and vaulted ceilings created an atmosphere of serious authority that made even Cole feel small. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Ashford, met with them before the proceedings began. She had a reputation for relentless competence and zero tolerance for injustice, qualities that made her simultaneously admired and feared across multiple territories. "I want to be clear about what's going to happen," she told the children, her voice direct but kind. "You'll each be asked to describe your experiences with Reverend Crow. The defense attorney will try to make it seem like you're exaggerating or lying. He might ask uncomfortable questions or try to confuse you. Your job is simply to tell the truth as you experienced it. Can you do that?" They nodded, though Faye clung to Hannah's hand with white-knuckled intensity. "Good. Remember that Crow can't hurt you anymore. He's in custody, and even if this hearing somehow goes wrong, he'll never have authority over children again. You're safe, you're protected, and you're doing something incredibly brave by speaking up." Mara testified first, her young voice steady as she described months of near starvation, the rotting cabin, Crow's sporadic food deliveries, and constant reminders that he was working on their permanent placement. The defense attorney tried to shake her, suggesting she was a difficult child whose behavior had driven away potential guardians. "I protected my siblings," Mara said flatly. "When adults came looking for free labor or wanting to split us up, I said no. That's not being difficult. That's being a good sister." The jury, composed of ranchers and businessmen who understood hard choices and loyalty, nodded approval. The defense attorney moved on. Ben described his infected leg in clinical detail, the pain he'd endured while Crow insisted prayer was sufficient treatment, the permanent damage that could have been prevented with basic medical care. His twisted leg, visible to everyone in the courtroom, was evidence beyond refutation. Noah's testimony was the most damning. He recounted, word for word, Crow's comments about black children being worth more to certain employers because they were expendable. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Even the defense attorney looked uncomfortable, unable to find a way to reframe such blatant dehumanization. Lily presented her drawings, page after page showing the progression of their suffering, rendered with the clarity of someone who processed trauma through art. The final image showed 5 children holding hands, while a dark figure with Crow's face walked away carrying a bag of coins. And Faye, tiny and fierce, told the jury in her clear child's voice about burning with fever, while the Reverend said it was in the Lord's hands, about drinking contaminated water because there was nothing else, about believing she was going to die while the adults who were supposed to protect her did nothing. But I didn't die, she concluded, because Cole came and he actually cared if I lived. That's the difference between him and Reverend Crow. Cole sees children as people. Reverend Crow sees children as money. When the defense attorney tried to suggest she was too young to understand the situation, Faye fixed him with a stare that could have melted steel. I understood I was dying. I understood nobody was helping. I understand that perfectly fine. The courtroom was silent after that, the kind of weighted silence that comes when truth lands too heavily to dispute. The grand jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning with their decision. Silas Crow would face criminal charges on 11 counts of child endangerment resulting in death, multiple counts of fraud and falsification of records, and conspiracy to violate territorial and federal child welfare statutes. If convicted, he faced decades in prison. Margaret Ashford found Cole and Hannah afterward, her expression satisfied. Those children were extraordinary. Their testimonies sealed the case in ways documentary evidence never could. The jury saw exactly what Crow was, a predator in preacher's clothing. Thank you for bringing them forward. They deserve the credit, not us, Hannah said. They're the ones who had the courage to speak. True, but you gave them the stability and support that made that courage possible. Don't underestimate your role in their healing. Ashford handed Cole a card. I'm based in Denver. If you ever need legal assistance or references for employment, contact me. People who fight for vulnerable children are rare enough that I like to stay connected with them. The journey back to Silver Creek was quieter than the journey out, the children subdued but clearly relieved. They'd done what they came to do, faced their trauma in a public forum, and emerged intact. Whatever happened next, they'd proven their strength to themselves and anyone paying attention. 2 days after their return, the final crisis arrived not with legal documents, but with fire. Cole smelled smoke first, jerking awake from exhausted sleep to the acrid scent of burning wood. He was out of bed and moving before his mind fully processed the danger, shouting for Hannah and the children to wake up. The cabin's main room was filling with smoke, flames visible through the windows from outside. Someone had set fire to the porch and the dry grass surrounding the structure, creating a ring of flame that was rapidly spreading. Out the back window, Cole ordered, his battlefield instincts taking over. Hannah, get the children out. I'll follow. But even as he spoke, he heard voices outside. Multiple men, their laughter carrying over the fire's crackle. This wasn't an accident or random arson. This was intentional, coordinated, designed to trap them inside. They're outside, Noah said, his face pale but controlled. Waiting for us to run out. This is an ambush. Cole's mind raced through options. The fire was spreading fast, cutting off the front exit completely. The back window was their only escape, but if men were positioned there waiting, they'd be vulnerable climbing through one by one. And with 5 children and Hannah to protect, Cole couldn't fight off multiple attackers while ensuring everyone got clear. Then he heard it. The thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast. Through the smoke-hazed window, he saw riders emerging from darkness. Matilda Crane on her gray stallion, Samuel, and 3 other ranch hands behind her, all armed and moving with purpose. Fire! Matilda's voice cut through the chaos. Someone get water from the creek. Samuel, check for survivors inside. The men outside scattered at her arrival, their ambush turned into retreat by unexpected interference. Cole didn't waste the opportunity. He boosted the children through the back window one by one, Hannah following, then hauled himself through as flames began eating into the cabin's walls. Samuel materialized out of smoke and darkness, his arms already reaching for Faye. This way! Quick! They ran, smoke and fear driving them toward the creek, where Matilda's hands were already organizing a bucket brigade. The cabin was too far gone to save, but they could prevent the fire from spreading to the ranch's other structures. Cole worked alongside the ranch hands, hauling water until his arms screamed and his lungs burned from smoke inhalation. Beside him, Ben worked with fierce determination despite his twisted leg. Mara organized the younger children into a relay system that kept buckets moving efficiently. Even Lily helped. Her silence transformed from trauma response into focused concentration. By dawn, the fire was contained. The foreman's cabin was a smoking ruin, but the flames hadn't spread beyond it, and more importantly, everyone had survived. Matilda surveyed the damage with cold fury. I saw 3 men running when we arrived. Didn't get good looks at their faces, but I recognized one horse. Belongs to the councilman who led the mob at Hannah's bakery. They tried to kill us, Hannah said, her voice shaking with exhaustion and rage. They set fire to a building with children sleeping inside and waited outside to make sure we couldn't escape. That's attempted murder. It is, Matilda agreed, and I'll make sure the territorial marshal knows it. But Cole, Hannah, this proves what you've suspected. Silver Creek isn't safe for your family. Even with Crow in custody, even with legal protection, there are people here who want you gone badly enough to commit murder. You need to leave. Cole looked at the smoking ruins of the cabin that had been their home for 2 months. All their possessions were inside. Clothes, Hannah's wedding ring that had belonged to her mother, the children's few treasured items. Everything gone except what they'd been wearing. But they were alive. That mattered more than possessions. Denver, he said. We'll go to Denver. Margaret Ashford said she could help with employment references. It's big enough that we could actually disappear, start over without Silver Creek's poison following us. I'll provide letters of reference for both of you, Matilda said, and enough money to get established. Call it severance pay and investment in your future. You've both worked hard enough to earn it. We can't take your charity. It's not charity. It's payment for services rendered and compensation for the fact that working for me made you targets. Besides, I'm a wealthy widow with no heirs. Let me spend my money on something worthwhile instead of watching it accumulate pointlessly. Matilda's expression softened slightly. You've given me something to fight for these past months, Cole. Let me help you fight your way to something better. They spent the next week preparing for departure while staying in the main ranch house under Matilda's protection. The territorial marshal arrived to investigate the arson, but the evidence was circumstantial, and the witnesses conveniently absent or afflicted with selective memory. Silver Creek was closing ranks, protecting its own even when its own meant attempted murderers. We could push this, the marshal said. Force testimony, dig deeper. But honest assessment? You'd spend months fighting for a conviction that might not stick, all while remaining targets for retaliation. Sometimes the smarter move is cutting your losses and finding safer ground. It galled Cole to leave without justice, but the marshal was right. The children's safety mattered more than revenge or principle. They'd won the important battle. Crow was facing justice. The children were legally theirs, and they'd proven their family could survive anything thrown at it. Everything else was just details. The morning they left, half of Silver Creek turned out to watch, some celebrating their departure, others silent with shame, a few openly sympathetic but unwilling to speak up. Hannah stood tall despite the judgment, her hand in Cole's, her other arm around Faye. Only a handful of people came to actually say goodbye. Dr. Hartwell approached the wagon, his expression complicated. I wanted to apologize, he said, for my initial refusal to treat Faye, for letting politics influence medical decisions, for being part of the system that failed these children. You showed me what actual integrity looks like, and I'm ashamed it took threats and property damage to make me remember my oath. Will you do better going forward? Cole asked. I will. I've already told this council I'm withdrawing from their group and focusing solely on medicine. Won't change the past, but maybe it prevents future children from suffering like yours did. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Cole nodded acknowledgement. Mrs. Aldrich came next, though she didn't apologize. Instead, she handed Noah a wrapped package. Books, she said curtly. For continuing your education in Denver, you're a bright boy despite my best efforts to ignore it. Don't waste that intelligence. Noah accepted the package with quiet dignity. Thank you, ma'am. I won't. And finally, standing slightly apart from Silver Creek's watching crowd, a group of ranch hands led by Samuel. They'd pooled money to buy supplies for the journey and sent a letter ahead to contacts in Denver who might have employment opportunities. You're good people, Samuel said simply. Don't let this town convince you otherwise. What you did for those children, choosing them, fighting for them, keeping your promises when every easier path was available, that matters more than all of Silver Creek's judgment combined. The wagon rolled out at mid-morning, pulled by horses Matilda had gifted them, along with enough money to establish themselves in Denver. Cole drove while Hannah sat beside him, the 5 children arranged in the wagon bed among their few remaining possessions and the supplies for the journey. As Silver Creek receded behind them, Mara spoke up. "Are we running away?" Cole considered the question carefully. "We're choosing better circumstances over worse ones. That's not running, that's wisdom. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't standing your ground against impossible odds. Sometimes it's recognizing when ground isn't worth holding and finding better places to build your life. Will Denver be better? I don't know, but it'll be different, and we'll face whatever comes there together as a family. That's what matters." The journey to Denver took 8 days of steady travel through Wyoming's vast grasslands and Colorado's emerging mountains. The children adapted to wagon life with the resilience they'd shown through everything else, turning the journey into an adventure rather than an ordeal. Ben taught the others constellation names during evening camps. Noah read aloud from the books Mrs. Aldrich had given him. Lily drew everything they passed, building a visual diary of their journey. And Faye, fully recovered now, provided a running commentary on every bird and rabbit and interesting cloud formation. Hannah proved her worth as a trail cook, turning basic supplies into meals that kept everyone fed and mostly happy. And Cole discovered that the skills he'd learned in the war, navigation, camp organization, threat assessment, translated well to protecting a family on the road. They talked during those long days of travel, really talked for the first time since their hasty marriage. Hannah shared memories of her childhood in St. Louis, her dreams of expanding the bakery into something bigger, her fears about being adequate as a mother to 5 children with complex needs. Cole described his Tennessee farm, his daughter Sarah's laugh, the way Mary had sung while cooking, the weight of grief that had driven him to 3 years of aimless wandering. "Do you think we would have married if circumstances had been different?" Hannah asked one evening. "If we'd met in normal ways, had time to court properly, weren't desperate to save children?" Cole thought about it honestly. "I don't know. We're different people. You're educated and accomplished. I'm a broke soldier with more scars than prospects. In normal circumstances, our paths might never have crossed, or if they did, we might not have seen each other as potential partners. But we're partners now. We are. Built on desperation and shared purpose rather than romance, but real nonetheless." He met her eyes in the firelight. "Does that bother you? That we didn't have the courtship and romance you deserved?" "Sometimes," Hannah admitted. "I think about what might have been if my life had gone differently, if Thomas had lived and James had stayed. But then I look at these children and what we've built together, and I think maybe desperation and shared purpose are better foundations than romance anyway. Romance fades. Commitment to something larger than yourself, that endures." "You think we'll endure?" "I think we've already endured more than most marriages face in a lifetime. Everything else is just details." Denver emerged from the plains like a promise made concrete, buildings rising higher than Wyoming's scattered structures, streets busy with commerce and purpose, the smell of coal smoke and possibility thick in the air. It was overwhelming after months in Silver Creek's isolation, but that overwhelming quality felt like opportunity rather than threat. Margaret Ashford met them at her office, her sharp eyes taking in the wagon, the exhausted family, the complete absence of anything beyond basic supplies. "You left everything behind." "Fire took most of it," Cole explained. "Arson from Crow's remaining supporters. We decided leaving was smarter than staying to fight people willing to commit murder." "Smart decision, though I'm sorry circumstances forced it." Ashford handed him a folder. "I made inquiries. There's a construction company needing experienced workers for a new hotel project, steady work at decent wages, and a bakery on Larimer Street whose owner is getting old and looking for someone to eventually take over the business. Both positions are available if you want them." The opportunities were more than Cole had dared hope for. "Why are you helping us like this?" "Because competent people who prioritize children's welfare are valuable, and I've learned to recognize and cultivate such people when I find them." Ashford smiled slightly. "Also because I'm vindictive enough to enjoy watching you succeed despite Silver Creek's best efforts to destroy you. Consider it my personal revenge on small-minded bigots everywhere." They took both positions. Cole started at the construction site the next day, earning wages that dwarfed what the ranch had paid. Hannah began working at the bakery, her skills and experience making her invaluable to the aging owner who'd been struggling to keep up with demand. Within a month, they'd found a house, small but solid, with enough rooms for the children to have actual privacy. Within 3 months, the bakery owner had offered Hannah a partnership with the understanding she'd eventually take over complete ownership. Within 6 months, Judge Harrison arrived in Denver for his final custody review, examined their circumstances, and finalized the adoption without hesitation. "You've exceeded every requirement and expectation," he told them. "Those children are thriving in ways I frankly didn't think possible given how damaged they were when I first met them. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Ryder. Your family is now legally permanent." The relief was overwhelming. No more threat of separation, no more provisional status, no more looking over their shoulders waiting for someone to challenge their right to raise these children. They were a family now, recognized by law and earned through countless battles won. That night, they celebrated with a dinner that stretched their modest budget but felt necessary anyway. Cole watched his family gathered around the table, Mara laughing at something Ben said, Noah helping Faye with her arithmetic, Lily showing Hannah her latest drawings, and felt something in his chest that had been frozen since Sarah's death finally thawed completely. This was what he'd been drifting toward without knowing it. Not oblivion, but purpose. Not forgetting his losses, but building something new from their wreckage. Not replacing Sarah and Mary, but honoring their memory by refusing to let grief destroy his capacity to love and protect. Hannah caught his eye across the table, understanding in her expression. They'd built this together, this loud, chaotic, beautiful family that shouldn't exist by any logical measure. 2 broken people and 5 damaged children, forged into something whole through sheer determination and accumulated acts of love. "What are you thinking about?" she asked later, after the children had gone to bed. "About promises," Cole said. "About the 3 I made to Mara that first day. Medicine for Faye, food and shelter for all of them, and protection from people who'd split them up or ship them off. I kept all 3. You did more than keep promises. You gave them a future they didn't think was possible. You showed them adults could be trusted, that commitment actually meant something." Hannah's hand found his. "You saved them, Cole. In every way that matters. We saved them. You were there every step, fighting just as hard. Then we saved each other. All 7 of us pulling each other back from edges we were too close to falling over." She leaned her head on his shoulder, the gesture familiar now, after months of partnership. "I never thanked you properly for asking me to marry you, for seeing that I had love with nowhere to put it, and giving me somewhere to put it, for making me a mother again when I thought that part of my life was finished. I never thanked you for saying yes to a broke soldier with nothing to offer but problems and promises. The problems made it interesting. The promises made it worthwhile." Hannah laughed softly. "We've had quite a journey from that desperate proposal in the bakery to here. No regrets?" "Not a single one. You?" Cole thought about everything they'd endured, the courtroom battles, the fire, the constant hostility, the near loss of Faye multiple times, the economic struggle of supporting 5 children on minimal resources. By any rational measure, the past months had been brutal. But he thought about Faye's laugh, loud and infectious, about Mara slowly learning to be 11 instead of ancient, about Ben's growing confidence as his legs strengthened, about Noah standing tall at school in Denver where his intelligence was recognized instead of his race used against him, about Lily speaking her first words since her parents' death, tentative but real, about becoming a father again, not to replace Sarah but to honor her memory by being the parent he wished he'd been able to be for her. "No regrets," he said. "Not a single one." The years that followed proved the foundation they'd built was solid enough to withstand time's tests. The construction work led to a foreman position, then eventually a partnership in the company. Hannah took over the bakery completely, expanding it into a thriving business that employed several people and became known throughout Denver for quality. The children flourished in ways Silver Creek never would have allowed. Mara grew into a fierce young woman who eventually attended normal school and became a teacher herself, dedicated to ensuring no child under her care ever felt invisible or disposable. Ben's twisted leg never fully healed, but he learned to work around it, eventually becoming a skilled bookkeeper whose sharp mind for numbers made him invaluable to local businesses. Noah exceeded every expectation, his intelligence and determination carrying him through secondary school and eventually to university where he studied law with the goal of protecting vulnerable people from systems that treated them as expendable. Lily became an artist whose drawings evolved into paintings that captured both beauty and pain. With unflinching honesty, Her silence transformed into powerful visual voice. And Faye, the little girl who'd nearly died from neglect while a town looked away, grew up healthy and strong and unafraid. Her early trauma leaving scars but not destroying her capacity for joy and trust. She became a nurse, drawn to medicine by memories of Dr. Hartwell's reluctant care and Cole's desperate vigil, determined to be the kind of medical professional who saw patients as people rather than problems. Cole and Hannah's marriage, born of desperation and shared purpose, deepened into something neither had expected. Not the passionate romance of youth, perhaps, but something more durable. Partnership built on mutual respect, shared struggle, and the daily choice to keep showing up for each other and the family they'd built. It wasn't the life either had imagined, but it was better than imagination because it was real. On a warm evening, 15 years after that desperate day when Cole had stumbled into a rotting cabin and found 5 children nearly dead from neglect, the family gathered for dinner as they did every Sunday. The children weren't children anymore. Mara was 26 and engaged to a schoolteacher. Ben was 25 and running his own bookkeeping firm. Noah was 24 and in his final year of law school. Lily was 23 with her first gallery showing scheduled, and Faye was 20 and in nursing school. They'd all survived. More than survived. They'd thrived, each finding their own path while maintaining the bonds that had sustained them through their darkest times. "Remember when we all lived in that tiny foreman's cabin?" Mara asked, laughing. 5 kids in one room, everyone constantly underfoot. "I remember Cole threatening to build bunks 3 beds high if we didn't learn to share space better," Ben said. "I remember the fire," Noah added, his voice quieter. "Waking up to smoke and Cole shouting orders like we were soldiers under his command. I was terrified, but also knew somehow we'd be okay because Cole wouldn't let us die." "I remember arriving in Denver," Lily said. Her voice was still soft, but she spoke freely now, her childhood silence transformed into thoughtful consideration rather than traumatic muteness. "Thinking maybe we'd finally found somewhere we could just be a family without constantly fighting for the right to exist. And we did," Faye concluded. "Found our place, built our lives, became people our younger selves wouldn't have believed possible." Cole listened to them talk, these 5 souls he'd chosen to save and who'd saved him in return. He thought about that first night in the cabin when he'd made 3 promises that seemed impossible to keep. Medicine for Faye, kept when Dr. Hartwell finally did his job. Food and shelter, kept through work at the ranch, then construction, then partnership and property ownership. Protection from separation and exploitation, kept through courtroom battles and the desperate flight to Denver and 15 years of daily commitment to their welfare. But the promises went both ways, he'd learned, because while he'd kept his promises to them, they'd kept unspoken promises to him. They'd given him a reason to stop drifting, to care again, to believe redemption was possible for broken men who'd lost everything. They taught him that family wasn't about blood or legal documents, but about choosing each other consistently, especially when that choice was difficult. "What are you thinking about, Papa?" Faye asked. She still called him that sometimes, reverting to the name she'd given him when she was 5 and dying. "About promises," Cole said, "about keeping them and what they cost and why they're worth the price anyway." Hannah's hand found his under the table, her touch familiar and grounding. "No regrets?" she asked quietly, echoing that conversation from 15 years ago. Cole looked around the table at faces he knew as well as his own, at the family built from desperation and determination and daily acts of love, at the life they'd constructed from wreckage and refused to let anyone destroy. "Not a single one," he said. "Not then, not now, not ever." And in that moment, surrounded by the evidence of promises kept and battles won and love proven through accumulated years of showing up, Cole Ryder finally understood what he'd been seeking during those 3 years of aimless drifting. Not oblivion, not forgetting, not even peace exactly. Just this. A table full of people who'd chosen each other when choosing would have been easier to avoid. A family built on commitment rather than accident. A life that mattered because it had been earned through promises kept and courage shown and the simple refusal to abandon people who needed him. The summer evening stretched long and golden through Denver's streets, carrying the sounds of a city alive with possibility. Inside one modest house among thousands, 7 people who'd each known profound loss celebrated the family they'd become, not despite their scars, but because of them. Not by forgetting trauma, but by refusing to let it define their capacity for love and trust and hope. The war had taught Cole that some things, once broken, stayed broken. But these children, this woman, this strange, beautiful family, had taught him something better. That healing was possible if you were willing to endure the pain of it. That redemption wasn't given but earned through daily choice and accumulated acts of courage. That sometimes the most important victories weren't dramatic battles, but the quiet persistence of showing up, keeping promises, and choosing love over the easier path of protecting yourself from further loss. Outside, the sun set slowly over the Rocky Mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Inside, a family built from broken pieces sat together in the gathering dusk, their laughter and conversation a testament to survival and redemption and the transformative power of promises kept. The story that began in desperation and heat, and a knife held by trembling hands, had found its ending not in dramatic rescue or perfect resolution, but in something better. The simple truth that love, commitment, and daily choice could transform even the most damaged souls into something whole. Not perfect, not without scars, but real and lasting, and worth every sacrifice it took to build. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.